Chapter 1400. The nurse beside him was immediately frightened. She hurriedly ran to find a doctor. The doctor hurried over and gave Gu Namli a fever-reducing injection. Then there was a series of cumbersome examinations. In the end, the doctor had no choice. "You need to sleep, Mr. Gu." Gu Namli was usually not so weak. He actually said weakly, "I can't sleep." The doctor tried to persuade him. "Is there anything that can make you feel at ease and let you rest for a while? You've been working so hard. A small illness can become a terrible illness for you. Otherwise, after so many days, the wound on a normal person's shoulder would have already scabbed over." Only his wound was still suppurating. It was because he had endured too much that his immune system could no longer resist the foreign bacteria. Gu Namli was silent for a while. His face was abnormally red. It was frightening to look at. There was a moment of weakness in his eyes. Of course, it was just a flash. No one saw it. Then, the doctor heard him say something vaguely. The doctor wanted to listen carefully, but just as his body was about to approach, Gu Namli was already looking at him coldly, as if he was displeased that he was too offensive. The doctor was so scared that he broke out in cold sweat and immediately didn't dare to say anything. Gu Namli lowered his eyes and suddenly said, "Give me the phone." The person beside him immediately took the phone. Gu Namli's fingers hesitated for a moment before he dialed a number that he had never called before. It was just a temporary drug. He had endured for so many years. What couldn't he endure for a Wei Bai? Although he really wanted to completely crush her dazzling and arrogant appearance under his feet, and then watch her be smashed to pieces. If she hadn't been able to make him sleep, he might have really started to suppress and torture her. That night, he did fall asleep, even if he had nightmares later on. But Wei Bai was the first person to pull him out of the swamp when he had fallen into such a deep nightmare. The phone rang for a while, but Gu Namli felt that his patience was running out. Just as he was about to hang up, the phone was picked up. "Hello." It was her voice, lazy, accompanied by the sound of rain. "Is it raining?" Gu Namli didn't think much of it. "Do you want to do business?" Didn't she go to the Chun family to ask for land to clear her name? In this line of work, there were many people who wanted to change careers and turn over a new leaf, but they were all dead. She still dared to take this path. Her courage was commendable. Wei Bai was silent for a few seconds before she said slowly, "What business?" "Gu Namli, sleep with me." Wei Bai. Such charming words. If she didn't know that Gu Namli was really just sleeping, she applauded his wretchedness. Gu Namli's voice was unusually hoarse and weak. He leaned against the soft pillow and said tiredly, "I'll help you clean up the smuggling business." Bai Chi's smuggling business was the true pillar of the Bai family. It was true that the military fire could not be completely transformed. However, some of the most important and profitable businesses could. It was just that not many people were able to successfully transform these legal businesses. After all, in the business circle, who will be willing to let you steal their business? Even if you have a legitimate business, you can't wash away your dark background. You can be overturned at any time. And Gu Namli had the power to protect Wei Bai. Wei Bai was silent for a while before asking, "How long will I sleep with you?" "System, I feel like I'm listening to some kind of XX transaction. It's filled with all kinds of dirty and unspeakable fantasies." Gu Namli. Until /crossover system. Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com//transmigration system. Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com transmigration system. Adonis, come here // Chapter 1401. He wanted to give a specific date. However, he heard the sound of water on her end. It was too obvious. He reacted in hindsight. "What are you doing?" Wei Bai. "Taking a shower." Of course, to answer the call, she did not stand under the shower, but she did not turn off the sound of the water. Gu Namli's head was throbbing, but he could not help but think of how this woman looked when she was taking a shower. His face stiffened for a moment before he said, "When you've successfully washed your hands clean, the deal will be over." With that, He hung up the phone and covered his eyes. His body was very uncomfortable, but her words were like a repeater. He kept on showering. Gu Namli was half asleep. Someone beside her said cautiously, "Mr. Gu, the young lady from the Bai family is here." After being reprimanded by Gu Namli, everyone knew that they could not call her Miss Bai. However, it was not appropriate to call her by her name. It was simply too difficult. Gu Namli's face was pale. He opened his eyes tiredly and said lightly, "Just call her as before. Let her in. In the future, let her in when she comes. There's no need to report." The subordinate seemed to be stunned for 3 seconds before replying and leaving. Mr. Gu had never let that woman in without reporting. It seemed that Miss Bai had a special status. When Wei Bai walked into the room, she saw Gu Namli half leaning on a big pillow. His head was on the pillow, and his eyes were closed. His short black hair was sticking to his rosy cheeks. He seemed to be very uncomfortable. The collar of his pajamas was open, and he was biting his lips unconsciously. A thin trace of red on his lips made him look especially fragile. Wei Bai knew from the system that Gu Namli had severe insomnia to the point of falling sick. However, this was the first time she saw that insomnia could torment a grown man to such an extent. She walked over and saw that the ice pack was casually thrown aside. Gu Namli must have thrown it himself. The doctor did not seem to have the guts to command him. Thus, he allowed him to burn it willfully. Wei Bai reached for the ice pack and gently touched his forehead with her other hand. Gu Namli had closed his eyes to endure the pain and did not notice Wei Bai's arrival. Her hand was much colder than his temperature. When it touched his fair forehead, he instinctively flinched. Gu Namli quickly opened his eyes. A trace of ice-cold vigilance flashed past his eyes. Then he saw her lowering her head, her thick black eyelashes covering her beautiful eyes. Her eyes reflected light, like scattered stars. Her expression was indescribably gentle. Her fingers pressed against his forehead, her movements natural and familiar. Then, he heard her disapproving voice. "Why are you like this? You're not a child." Gu Namli's mind was in a mess. If it were any other time, he would not have given her the chance to get so close to him. But at this moment, he had been tormented by all kinds of darkness for too long. The warm fragrance on her body and the gentle expression on her face that bordered on compassion. It actually made him greedy. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -15. Wei Bai, completely unhappy. The favorability is going up and down numb. So she was very calm and put the ice pack on his forehead. Gu Namli reached out his hand. His palm was very hot. Even if he was so weak, his strength was still frighteningly strong. He suppressed his voice so that his overly hoarse throat would not be too vague. "Go to bed, sleep." He needed sleep too much. Chapter 1402. He couldn't wait to pull her onto the bed immediately. Wei Bai raised her eyebrows. "You're really impatient." Gu Namli was expressionless, and his eyes were still cold. It was a pity that his lying posture was too tired and haggard. It wasn't that scary anymore. Wei Bai restrained the sarcasm on her face and reached out to pull out his pillow. Gu Namli fell onto the mattress because his body was weak. Wei threw the pillow to the ground and said to the frightened nurse on the side, "Find a lower pillow, not too soft. Warm Baikai is on standby 24 hours a day. Get new quilts, get a few more beds. Change them when they're wet." She ordered her subordinates methodically. It was as if she didn't know whose territory she was in. And when he said that he was going to do business with her, it was just a verbal agreement. This kind of agreement could be broken at any time, but she wasn't afraid at all. He had asked her to come here just to kill her. This woman, sometimes she was smart, but sometimes she was like an idiot. Wei Bai replaced Gu Namli's pillow with a new one. Then she supported the back of his head with one hand and gently placed his head on the pillow. His hand couldn't hold on for too long, so it had already let go. Wei Bai conveniently put an ice pack on him and stuffed a thermometer into his mouth. She reached out to pull his pajamas open and covered his chest with a blanket. Then she said casually, "You need to cool down, baby." Gu Namli didn't resist. His face was unnaturally red, but his eyes were so clear that there was a hint of moisture in them, reminding one of a puppy. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but reach out to rub his black hair. Her tone was much gentler. It's just a fever. Don't worry. Gu Nanli's face darkened, and he said coldly, You think I don't dare to kill you? No one dared to touch his head for such an inappropriate action. This place was fatal and offensive. Although his expression was unusually gloomy, he had a thermometer in his mouth. His words were too vague and did not have any frightening effect. Wei Wei Bai teased him and continued to ruffle his hair, messing up his black hair. All right, little husky, do you still want to sleep with me? Don't be so defensive. Anyway, if I really want to kill you, there will be plenty of chances. She was referring to the time when he slept beside her. At that time, if she had really hardened her heart, she might have had a chance to kill him. It was only a possibility. After all, in the face of a real threat of death, his reflexes were still very strong, even in his sleep. Gu Nanli's mind went blank for a moment. The little husky. Wei Wei Bai had already lowered her head and pulled out the thermometer from his mouth. She glanced at the temperature and said, 39 degrees. Your fever is really high. Get the doctor to give you an intravenous drip. Gu Nanli's expression changed. I don't do infusions. Wei Wei Bai turned around and looked at him as if she was looking at a mentally disabled brat. She said nonchalantly, What's wrong with the infusion? Are you afraid of poison or needles? Gu Nanli's body stiffened. He clenched his fingers and said, I just lack sleep. Yes, he was afraid of needles. Who knew? He would not reveal such a retarded weakness. Wei Wei Bai had a look of understanding. It's okay to be afraid of needles. Many children before the age of 6 are afraid of needles. You're just one of them. It's not embarrassing. Wasn't this embarrassing enough? He was already a child before the age of 6. Had he been reduced to comparing himself with a child before the age of 6? Gu Nanli was also confused by the fever. He was usually a rational and clear-headed person, but after being tortured to the point of losing his mind, he was led by Wei Wei Bai. Is at https://www.sashu.com// Chapter 1403. He said coldly, following his instincts, I don't need an intravenous drip. Wei Wei Bai sighed helplessly. If you don't get an intravenous drip, you won't be able to get the fever down, and the ice pack won't be fast enough. I can only use my secret prescription. Gu Nanli wanted to laugh mockingly. What kind of secret prescription could there be for a high fever? Would he drink cold medicine or boiled Chinese medicine? But in the next second, Wei Wei Bai had already lowered her head, put her hand on his shoulder, and kissed him gently on the lips. This kiss was not as wild and passionate as the last time she had attacked him. Instead, it was as gentle as a cloud with a hint of sweetness, like the fruity taste of her lipstick. Her eyelashes were half closed, and there was a gentle light in her eyes, sincere and serious. It was as if this kiss meant a lot to her, and she cherished it very much. Her continuous and sweet strength left him dumbfounded for a long time, unable to regain his senses. When Wei Wei Bai let go of him, he saw her lips half closed. You'll be fine if you pass the cold to me. Gu Nanli had never heard such a retarded thing to say, but he did not refute. Then he saw her considerately press a pillow for him, and then feed him water. Then she felt that it was troublesome to use an ice pack to sleep, so she naturally asked the nurse to bring a fever patch. The fever patch was for children. After all, the doctor did not dare to imagine that Gu Nanli would actually want a fever patch. He even put the ice pack on his forehead unwillingly. If he dared to put a fever patch on his forehead, wouldn't he kill him? So when the doctor heard that he wanted a fever patch, it was too late to go out and buy it, so he could only send his son's fever patch. Then, under the strange gazes of the doctor and the nurse, Wei Wei Bai put the fever patch on Gu Nanli's forehead and rubbed his hair. It was almost like taking care of a child. Everyone was so scared that they broke out in cold sweat, but no one dared to say anything. Just when everyone thought that Gu Nanli was going to lose his temper, he suddenly looked up at them coldly. Get out! Everyone was stunned and immediately looked at Wei Wei Bai in surprise. Then they ran out and closed the door behind them. Gu Nanli was so hard to please, so they were very happy that someone was willing to accept him. After everyone had left, Gu Nanli had lost all his strength. He leaned his head against the pillow and found it difficult to breathe. The bed was very big. Lying in the middle, he actually looked a little lonely. Wei Wei Bai didn't say much. She took off her coat and shoes, went to bed, pulled the quilt, and took the initiative to hug him. He could feel the coolness of her body and the fragrance of the shower gel that she had just taken. It was neither rich nor light, but it suited her very well. Gu Nanli was actually not used to having someone else lying next to him, but he could fall asleep next to her. He had no idea why he had to have Wei Wei Bai. After all, he had a reason to hate her. After Wei Wei Bai hugged him, she found that his body was as stiff as a rock. She comforted him kindly. "I won't molest you when you're asleep. You can sleep peacefully." Gu Nanli suddenly asked, "Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" After all, they had died a few times before. "Wei Wei Bai, you said yourself that you want to do business with me and stop our feud. What's there to be afraid of?" "Gu Nanli, you trust me that much?" Wei Wei Bai was surprised. "Of course I trust you. I don't know about other things, but I can trust you." Gu Nanli was silent for a moment. He was actually a little aggrieved by her words. He felt that if he threw out a threat, it would be soft and there would be no resistance. Wei Wei Bai suddenly reached out and held the back of his head, pressing his face to her chest. She reached out and patted his back casually. "Go to sleep. After all, it's business. I'll do my best." Gu Nanli pressed against her chest. His face turned even redder. He didn't know if it was because of the fever or some other reason. But listening to her steady heartbeat, he slowly closed his eyes. The familiar feeling of sleepiness enveloped him. Just as he was about to fall asleep, he heard by Wei Wei's voice, neither light nor heavy. "By the way, you drink a lot of water. Remember to tell me when you need to wake up at night. I'll get you a urinal." Gu Nanli, why did it feel like she was taking care of a paralyzed person? // Chapter 1404. Although she could feel that Gu Nanli was very dissatisfied, very conflicted, very hesitant, and even sullen. But the favorability increased, and it didn't fall down like a fence-sitter. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at -10. Although it was still at -0 with all kinds of negative emotions, it was still good news for Wei Wei Bai, because this kind of increase in favorability finally returned to the territory she was familiar with. No matter how slow it was, as long as it didn't go up and down like before, she could roughly grasp Gu Nanli's emotional state. And the system was happily munching on the discounted 2 bags of dried bananas a day. Because the increase in favorability this time was finally not some messy feelings. It was real data related to love. After so many worlds, only love was the most solid and easiest to raise favorability. Although family affection was also very good. But, generally speaking, there really weren't any guides that could raise the affection value to 100. So when the love value increased, the system let out a sigh of relief like the host. Wei Wei Bai's sleep was very good, and she had the protection of the system. Even if Gu Nanli suddenly became hot-headed and wanted to shoot her with a gun, the system would also remind her in advance. She felt Gu Nanli move in the middle and immediately vaguely said, "Do you want to go to the bathroom? I'll have someone put the chamber pot under the bed. I'll get it for you." After saying this, she didn't even open her eyes. She was about to get up and drowsily reached for the chamber pot. Gu Nanli seemed to be silent for a bit before he pulled her back and hugged her. He coldly said, "No need." Wei Wei Bai didn't wake up at all. Hearing that it wasn't necessary, she immediately happily went back to sleep. Gu Nanli's fever had already subsided. This was the first time his body had received enough sleep, which made his irritable and unbearable temper calm down a lot. His black hair was a bit wet, sweating after the fever subsided. He silently looked at Wei Wei Bai, who was sleeping like a pig. This time, he didn't have any nightmares. He was calmer than ever. Because he had never slept for such a long time, he didn't feel sleepy at that moment. He turned his head and saw that her clothes were in a mess. He could almost see the shape of her underwear under the thin layer of undershirt. Moreover, the underwear was made of a very soft material without any support. Gu Nanli stared at her for a long time before he realized that his thoughts had wandered in that inexplicable direction. His face turned cold, but he didn't move. Instead, he continued to lie on his side. He stared at Wei Wei Bai for several hours. It was as if he was observing something strange. When Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes fluttered, as if she was about to wake up, he didn't know why he pulled the blanket over himself with a guilty conscience. The blanket covered her neck, and he quickly changed his position. With his back facing her, he closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep. After waiting for a while, he heard the woman beside him yawn lazily. Then, she lifted the blanket and got out of bed. Gunanli didn't move. It wasn't that he was afraid of her. It was just that he had never slept in the same bed as others, so he wasn't used to waking up to face someone. Just as Gunanli patiently closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep, a soft hand removed the fever patch on his forehead. Then that hand touched his cheek. She gently stroked his neck again, and then her voice rang out softly, just inches away from his ear. The fever is gone. Chapter 1405. When she touched him, his fingers had already touched the sharp knife that he had hidden under the bed. After all, she dared to put her fingers on his neck. This place was even more deadly than the head. Wei Wei Bai seemed to be unaware of his murderous intent. She pulled the blanket over, covered him tightly, and then walked out. Gunanli had already opened his eyes and watched her beautiful back as she walked out of the door. For a moment, the bed was empty and cold. He let go of the sharp knife in his hand, and there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. If it were not for insomnia, sharing a bed with Wei Wei Bai like this was actually very risky. Their relationship was too complicated. Suddenly, there was a faint sound from outside the door. Gunanli's sharp ears caught their conversation. Thin porridge, something light. A small plate of side dishes to go with the porridge will do. Not too much. When she ordered people, she was not condescending, nor was she requesting. It was natural to command others to do their work. She even made people listen to her willingly. If such a person really soared in the future, she would not be a useless person. When Wei Wei Bai walked in, she saw that Gunanli still had his eyes closed and his steady breathing. He was very professional in pretending to be asleep. The system was still nagging. He actually didn't increase his favorability. He's simply cold-hearted. Wei Wei Bai said lazily, "The general strategy does not have any obvious effect on Gunanli. If his favorability is too low and his vigilance is too strong, the effect will be reduced even more. For someone like Gunanli, it was a miracle that she was even willing to get close to him. If she was looking forward to using the gentle strategy from the beginning to let him let down his guard, that was almost impossible. What she was doing now was just to let him get used to her existence. And for the favorability to increase, some external catalysts were needed. Wei Wei Bai was not in a hurry. Anyway, there was plenty of time. If she really wasted her time with Gunanli until she was 70 or 80 years old, she would not be anxious. Therefore, a lifetime of strategy time was truly wonderful. When Wei Wei Bai returned to the room, she saw that Gunanli was quietly closing his eyes. The piercing cold light in his eyes was gone. His entire person had become much gentler. Under the influence of the morning light, he was actually as beautiful as a little angel. She walked over and silently reached out to touch his clothes. Then, she slowly unbuttoned his shirt. She just unbuttoned 3 or 4 buttons when Gunanli opened his eyes. His hand was gripping her wrist so hard that it felt like he was going to break it. Wei Wei Bai was like a soft dumpling. She was neither angry nor happy. Instead, she said calmly, "I'll help you change your clothes. They're all drenched in sweat. Also, I'll get the doctor to come over and bandage your wounds again." When she mentioned the gunshot wound, she paused slightly, not because she was upset, but because she explained, "I had no choice, you know." This shot had established her position in the Tao. After all, Bai Qi was dead. If a weak woman like her didn't want to end up in such a miserable state, she wouldn't be able to escape. He could only reveal his wolf-like fangs to tell everyone. Even if she lost her father, she could still support the Bai family. And the Bai family was the shelter she relied on to survive and shelter her from the wind and rain. Back then, she had provoked Gunanli and killed his sniper and several members of the management team. That was necessary. Even Gunanli could not say that Wei Wei Bai was wrong, because if he were in her position, he would be more ruthless than her and would not have the slightest bit of regret. Gu Nanli's eyes were cold as he looked at her like ice shards. Then he stood up. Before the business is done, I won't touch you. You sleep with me, and I won't break the contract and let you suffer. Address of the full text. https://www. Sashu. Com download of the full text. https://www. Sashu. com// for the convenience of your next reading. You can click on the save button. Chapter 1406. There was a hidden meaning in this sentence. It meant that when the deal was done, the hatred between them would remain as it was. The revenge of this shot would be left for after the deal was done. Wei Wei Bai sized him up for a while, but did not respond. Instead, she said, "Change your clothes and change your bandages. Then eat something to replenish your energy. You're not a child who needs to be coaxed, right?" Gu Nanli was aggrieved by her coaxing words. He still wanted to go against her, but he could not say a word. This woman always had the ability to shut him up until he couldn't say anything. He let go of her hand. "Coax me? You don't have a right." "Wei Wei Bai, do I need the right to coax you? You're the Jade Emperor." If it wasn't for the hard-earned good impression, she would have slapped him to wake him up. Chinibu. No, kindergarten class was sick and needed to be treated with electricity. Wei Wei Bai resisted the urge to strangle him to death. She got up and walked out to see if breakfast had arrived. Gu Nanli wanted to eat breakfast, so did she. She was already doing business at his house, so she should cover his meals too. When Gu Nanli saw her leave, he lowered his eyelashes and pondered for a while. Then, he rang the bell for the doctor. When Wei Wei Bai came in, she happened to see Gu Nanli sitting by the bed. He was topless, and the doctor was bandaging him. His body was not perfect, but filled with scars. The most serious scar was on his abdomen. It was almost like an opening that had been stitched up. This scar gave his body a fierce sense of strength. His face, however, was as fair and tender as a youth. Even though his expression was cold, it formed a beautiful contrast. When Gu Nanli saw Wei Wei Bai, he only looked up indifferently. Then, he asked the doctor to leave indifferently. Then, he put on his own clothes. He wore a white shirt and a gray suit jacket. He didn't wear a tie, but because of the clothes, he didn't look as young as before. After he was dressed, he buttoned his sleeves with one hand. Perhaps it was because he was weak. His fingers were trembling, and he didn't buckle them properly. Gu Nanli was not annoyed. Just as he was about to try again, Wei Wei Bai walked over. She reached out to pinch his expensive cufflinks and gently button them for him. Her soft fingertips brushed against his wrist, causing him to tremble slightly. Gu Nanli looked at her expressionlessly and suddenly said, "You sure know how to change your rudder according to the wind. What do you want from me?" Wei Wei Bai was straightforward. "I want to build a building, but there's a problem with the approval process. For such a special family like the Bai family, how could they get the approval to build a building?" If Bai Qi was still around, Wei Wei Bai would still have some connections. But now that he was dead, Wei Wei Bai would have to start all over again. Gu Nanli did not say anything. Instead, a cold look flashed past his eyes. He then walked out without saying anything. Wei Wei Bai followed after him indifferently. She finished her breakfast quickly. Gu Nanli held the spoon for a long time without moving it. After Wei Wei Bai finished eating, she wiped her mouth and got up to leave. She didn't hesitate at all. She said that she was here to sleep with him. After sleeping with him for the night, she planned to go home. Gu Nanli drank a mouthful of porridge slowly. Then, when she walked out of the door, he suddenly said softly, "Don't worry about the land. It'll be resolved soon." Wei Wei Bai stopped in her tracks. Then, she turned around and revealed a smile. She was genuinely happy. // Chapter 1407. Thank you, Mr. Gu. Even if I have to carry your chamber pot every day, I think it's worth it. After saying that, she ignored Gu Nanli's changed expression and went out directly. There was a car waiting for her outside the door. Bai Mu was the driver. When he saw Wei Wei Bai coming out of the door, he gripped the steering wheel a little hard. But soon, he got out of the car without any expression and opened the door for Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai got in the car and said calmly, "Let's go back." Bai Mu sat in the driver's seat and looked at the rearview mirror. He stared at her fair neck, but didn't find anything special. but she stayed by Gu Nanli's side the whole night. Xiao Bai? Wei Wei Bai shouted with some displeasure. Bai Mu immediately woke up from his trance and bowed respectfully. Yes, Mississippi. After she left, Gu Nanli held the spoon for a long time and suddenly threw it into the bowl. His eyes were still tired, but his eyes were very clear. Gu Nanli asked someone to clean up the table. Under the doctor's advice, he stayed in bed to rest, but he took some documents to his bed to correct. Wei Wei Bai came to sleep with him, and he gave her the resources to help her clear her name. This deal was like any deal he had made in the past. He felt very calm. After signing for a while, he felt that he had sat on something and was panicking. His cold and pale face was expressionless as he touched the quilt. He touched a slender and delicate bracelet. It was made of sparkling and translucent crystal and some light blue gems. It was very fashionable. Gu Nanli knew that it was Wei Wei Bai's. When he thought of another woman's things on his bed, he felt strange and novel. After all, this was the first time he touched someone else's things on his bed. Gu Nanli pondered for a moment before holding the bracelet in his hand. Then he got out of bed and opened the safe. A small silver pistol appeared inside. It was the gun that Wei Wei Bai had used to kill him. He casually threw the bracelet in and thought with a cold face, I'll definitely settle this with her in the future. He had injured him, killed his subordinates, prevented him from taking over the Bai family's assets, and even was one of the parties involved in the exchange of the crown prince. To him, her existence was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. He would not be happy if he did not get rid of her. If she hadn't been able to let him sleep peacefully, she wouldn't be able to live so comfortably now. Gu Nanli's mind was filled with all kinds of thoughts, but he did not reveal any of them. On the other hand, Wei Wei Bai's favorability dropped by 2 points when she heard that, but quickly rose back up. It was still -10. Today was another day that Gu Nanli hated her. At night, Wei Wei Bai came to the Gu family again as promised. This time, she came in a hurry and brought a mess of things. Gu Nanli looked at her with an ugly expression. She had brought a box of skincare products, cosmetics. She even had fake nail polish, lipstick, and fake tattoo stickers. Wei Wei Bai didn't feel unwelcome at all. She started to organize the things she brought. Gu Nanli stood beside her and looked at the pile of things that made him dizzy. What are these? He finally couldn't help but ask through gritted teeth. Wei Wei Bai picked up a bottle of rainbow color nail polish. Look, this is XX brand nail polish. This bottle is their company's new product. It looks really good. Gu Nanli, what's so good about this color? Wei Wei Bai picked up a tube of purple lipstick. Look, this is XX brand. It's the king of lipsticks, and purple is the king of all lipsticks. I love it. // Chapter 1408. Gu Nanli. I can't see the best, but I can see the best. Won't I be poisoned by this color? Wei Wei Bai picked up the tattoo sticker again. This is Peppa Pig's tattoo. It's very popular recently. Do you want to try it? It can be washed off with water. Gu Nanli finally couldn't take it anymore. Throw it out. These things were simply challenging the little bit of normal tolerance he had left. A whole bunch of bottles and jars were applied on his face. The thickness of the products was comparable to the iron door of a bank vault. Wei Wei Bai looked at him indifferently. Suddenly, a trace of disdain appeared in his eyes. Mr. Gu, if you let a woman throw her skincare products out, you will definitely not have a wife in the future. It wasn't easy for her to buy the most suitable skincare products for her skin. Did this man think it was easy? Which man would dare to touch a woman's skincare products and cosmetics? It was a deep hatred. Gu Nanli saw the disdain in her eyes. His eyelids twitched, and he finally said, Why did you bring these things here? After Wei Wei Bai arranged the cosmetics and skincare products, she moved them to the bathroom. Gu Nanli's bathroom was very big, clean, and bright. The mirror was also very big. It was more than enough to put her things. Gu Nanli stood at the door and saw that the floor beside him was filled with Wei Wei Bai's bottles and jars. He felt like he was in a nightmare. After Wei Wei Bai finished setting up, she turned around and said to him with a frown, I come to sleep with you every day, so I don't have time to do skincare. This is killing me. I'm used to doing skincare before sleeping and putting on makeup after waking up. This is the most basic survival condition of a woman. Gu Nanli, the most basic survival condition of a woman? What kind of survival condition was this? Weren't survival conditions of food, sleep, and a toilet? How could the rest of his stuff be considered a living condition? Gunanli felt his head hurt even more. However, when he thought about how his mental state had improved after a good night's sleep, he had reduced a large number of mistakes in his handling. He felt that he could tolerate Wei Bai's bottles for a while. After all, he was used to enduring silently. But Gunanli was too naive. When he finally got to sleep, he was going to sleep. After going to the bathroom to take a shower, he walked out of the bathroom. Suddenly, his footsteps paused, and his pupils shrank. He saw a monster sitting on his armchair. No, it was Wei Bai sitting on his sofa. That was where he was used to sitting when he was working. Wei Bai greeted Gunanli when she saw him. Is there a single-sided mirror here? I forgot to bring a small mirror. I don't know if the seaweed mud is even. Her face was covered in seaweed mud. People who didn't know better would have thought that they saw a green monster with blistering skin coming out to scare people. Gunanli, who was frightened, held back and calmed his 3 seconds of chaotic breathing. Then, he said in a calm voice with suppressed grinding of teeth, "No." Wei Bai nodded. "All right then, I'll bring more next time." Gunanli. Was this a junkyard? Why did she bring everything to his house? He finally endured it until she went to wash off the seaweed mud. He got on the bed and picked up the book to read a few pages. He thought that Wei Bai would come out of the bathroom with a normal face. But when he heard her footsteps coming out of the bathroom, he looked up and the book in his hand trembled, almost dropping it to the ground. Wei Bai's face, which was so pale that it didn't have any facial features, appeared under the pale light, and there was a terrifying sense of horror. To read the at https://www.sashu.com/ to read at https://www.sashu.com to read at https://www.sashu.com to read at https://m/sashu.com. Chapter 1409. Gunanli, who was shocked and expressionless. Wei Bai reached out and moved the moisturizing mask on her face. She even explained, after the seaweed mud, you need to hydrate. Otherwise, the skin will dry out after exfoliation. Gunanli, this was his knowledge blind spot. He couldn't say anything. Then, Gunanli watched as Wei Bai finally threw away the moisturizing mask. He saw her smearing her face, wiping and patting it. Gunanli, someone actually slapped herself with both hands. The living conditions of women were too strange. After much difficulty, Wei Bai finally recovered. He sized up her face without showing any expression. He couldn't tell how much she had smeared on her face at all. Wei Bai got on the bed. The moment the blanket was lifted, she rubbed against him. Gunanli was a little traumatized. He suddenly slapped the book on her face. You have so many things on your face. What if your face rots when you sleep at night? This was his sincere worry. The thought of sleeping with a woman whose face was smeared with who knew how many layers of unknown things. He was afraid that he would wake up to a disfigured face. Wei Bai, after much persuasion, she finally convinced this mentally disabled straight man that this thing would only make the skin wet and wouldn't disfigure the face. Wei Bai could finally sleep. She lay down and saw that Gunanli had turned off the lights, leaving only a small lamp on the table. She could still bear it. After all, she didn't like the dark. Then, he lay down quietly with his arm close to Wei Bai, as if this would prevent him from having nightmares. But in the next second, she leaned over and hugged him. Gunanli's face was pressed to a soft place by her. He froze for a second before controlling himself and starting to relax. Actually, he should move away, but his body seemed to be dependent on her and allowed himself to indulge in her embrace. Wei Bai reached out and gently stroked his hair. "Sleep, Mr. Gu." It was a gentle and soft sentence, and there was nothing pretentious about it. It was just as natural as warm water. He couldn't imagine how energetic she was usually. So gentle that it was compassionate. Gunanli's heart moved. He didn't know why, but he actually listened to her and couldn't help but close his eyes and let himself fall asleep. Even if she was disfigured, he felt that he could still fall asleep. And Wei Wei Bai also heard the sound of the favorability increase. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at -5 after such a long time. The favorability was simply slow. But for a man like Gu Nanli, it was already not easy. Wei Wei Bai didn't care about gains or losses. She lazily yawned, then hugged him and fell asleep peacefully. Gu Nanli slept soundly. It was rare for him to laze in bed for a while. When he opened his eyes, he was almost scared to death. "Mr. Gu, you're awake." Wei Wei Bai calmly applied foundation to her face. Because it wasn't finished yet, all kinds of dark and bright colors were mixed together. In Gu Nanli's eyes, it was no different from disfigurement. His breath stopped for 3 seconds. "Is this also a woman's survival condition?" Wei Wei Bai nodded. "Mr. Gu, when you wash your face, there's a facial cleanser in front of the mirror. Remember to wash it. That's mine. It's very useful." Then she turned her head, not interested in him at all, and began to put on makeup. Gu Nanli stiffened for a few seconds before finally getting off the bed and walking into the bathroom to wash up. He told himself to bear with it. If it wasn't for sleeping, he would have thrown Wei Wei Bai into the cement and mixed it. After brushing his teeth, he was just about to wash his face when he thought of Wei Wei Bai's words. Facial cleanser? Of course he knew what facial cleanser was, but he had never used it before. Wasn't enough to wash his face with water and wipe it with a towel? Gu Nanli turned his head to look at the pile of bottles and suddenly felt a little dizzy. There were all kinds of different languages and all kinds of different bottles. Where was the facial cleanser? He finally saw a bottle and was about to pick it up to study it, but suddenly put it back. What was wrong with him? Washing his face with water was the right thing to do. Using this lousy thing would disfigure him sooner or later. Gu Nanli fiercely wiped his face with the towel. Looking at his red lips and fair skin in the mirror, he once again confirmed that he had used the right steps to wash his face. He threw away the towel, resisted the urge to throw all the bottles into the bin, and walked out indifferently. Just as he reached the door, Wei Wei Bai heard the sound and turned to smile at him. "Good morning, Mr. Gu." Gu Nanli was stunned. Her skin was so beautiful that it seemed to glow under the light. Her bright red lips had a seductive luster, and her eyes were watery. When she smiled, it was simply charming. Without waiting for Gu Nanli to come back to his senses, Wei Wei Bai turned her head again. She held a makeup mirror in her hand and carefully looked at her face. "I feel that the color of the lipstick is too light. Today's makeup is seductive. It needs to be darker." Gu Nanli, were all women like this? The makeup process was like a ghost. When it was done, it seemed to look a little better. To read the at https://www.sashu.com/ to read at https://www.sashu.com to read at https://www.sashu.com to read at https://sashu.com/. Chapter 1410. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 0. Wei Wei Bai's face was a sickly beauty after the evil makeup. When she heard the notification of the favorability, she was stunned for 3 seconds. Only then did she wake up. Then she held the mirror and looked at her face. Sure enough, men were all little demons who didn't mean what they said. Once she put on makeup, she looked good. His favorable impression of him increased. The system saw that the host was acting up again and couldn't help but remind, "Don't apply it. You're going to be disfigured." Although it knew that some women liked skincare products and cosmetics. But what was the difference between applying this stuff and not applying this stuff? And with so many chemicals, wouldn't it ruin the face? Wei Wei Bai listened to the system's advice. She was already perfect enough, so she didn't need to apply it. So under Gu Nanli's strange gaze, she took out her nail polish again. Then, Gu Nanli saw all kinds of colorful and strange nail polish. It was simply, why were there so many colors? Weren't some colors the same? It felt the same. Why were there so many colors of red? Wei Wei Bai suddenly took out wine red and bright red nail polish and said to Gu Nanli, "Mr. Gu, which one do you think looks good?" "Mr. Gu, weren't they all the same?" Wei Wei Bai took out purple and yellow. "How about this?" Mr. Gu, applying such ugly colors to nails, were women's aesthetics so abnormal? Wei Wei Bai applied a layer of transparent base oil to her nails. Under Gu Namli's strange gaze, she took out a scary bright purple. This looks good. She muttered to herself and opened it. Then, she took out her hair. A hand was already pressing down on the back of her hand. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. She looked up and saw Gu Namli lowering his body. Although there was no expression on his handsome face, she could see the conflicted look in his eyes. He unconsciously bit his lips once. This action was indescribably childish. He didn't even know he had this expression. Then, he suppressed his emotions and said indifferently, "That's enough. You don't need to apply makeup. You look just as good." When he said the last 4 words, his face darkened. He felt as if someone was strangling him and biting him. He really couldn't stand it. This woman's nails were all this color. Can't you just admit it? Healthy fingernails had the most normal color and looked the best. Why did she have to wear this? Goosebumps appeared on her skin. Wei Wei Bai was stunned, then tilted her head to look at him. Because of her movements, the V-neck dress revealed a trace of seductive white. Gu Namli happened to see it. His gaze lingered for half a second before he slowly moved away. He happened to see Wei Wei Bai's expression. Her expression was surprisingly gentle, as if hearing his praise was very good for her. Gu Namli frowned, not quite understanding why she had such an expression. However, without her flamboyant beauty, she was undoubtedly softer and less aggressive. Gu Namli didn't like things that weren't aggressive, including people. Those who could stay by his side were all sharp and incisive. None of them were trash. However, when Wei Wei Bai showed such an expression, he actually didn't have the desire to attack. Wei Wei Bai quickly put away such an expression and smiled lightly. "Since my sugar daddy has requested so, I'll listen to you and not paint my nails." Just as Gu Namli was heaving a sigh of relief, Wei Wei Bai raised her feet and placed them on the chair. Slash. Chapter 14:11. Her round and cute toes shone with a healthy luster under the sun. Then, Gu Namli saw Wei Wei Bai pick up the burgundy nail polish and apply it. The healthy color of her toenails turned into a bright color. Gu Namli was expressionless. What happened to not applying nail polish? Then, he heard Wei Wei Bai mutter, "Toes are also very important. You must put on makeup for them too. Red is the most beautiful color." Gu Namli expressed that he did not want to say anything and threw a straight man bomb at her. Wei Wei Bai dressed herself up beautifully and said, "Next time, you have to get the wardrobe. Otherwise, it will be difficult to choose clothes." She had brought 2 sets of clothes to change into. Gu Namli expressed that, forget it, he should just bear with it. When he can't bear it anymore, he still had to bear with it. Who asked him to want to sleep? Wei Wei Bai put on her coat and beautiful high heels, then took her bag and said, "Mr. Gu, goodbye." After all, she was here to accompany him to sleep. The mission during the day was not within her job scope. Gu Namli finally realized that she was dressed too exquisitely. He was confused for a moment and actually asked something that he could not say. "Where are you going?" Wei Wei Bai was already walking towards the door. The crisp sound of her high heels on the ground stopped. She turned around lazily. Her charming eyes were exquisite and seductive. "Where else can I go?" "Of course, I'm going on a date, Mr. Gu." After saying that, she could not help but laugh. "I'm not like Mr. Gu. I'm like the old man who doesn't even have a suitor." Gu Namli stared at her. After a while, he did not say anything and just turned to leave. Wei Wei Bai glanced at him and turned to leave as well. The system looked here and there. Go left, go right. Zero favorability. This was too realistic. Without waiting for it to say anything, Wei Wei Bai sighed. "It's too insulting to call him a straight man. I already showed my legs in front of him and painted my nails. Why didn't he feel seduced at all?" The system was surprised. "Were you seducing him just now?" Wei Wei Bai was also surprised. "Am I not seducing?" She flipped her hair, put on her clothes, and even painted her nails on her fair and tender feet. Women were willing to do skincare and makeup in front of a man. How could he not understand such an obvious seduction? Any normal man would be able to feel that kind of faint, but absolutely impossible to ignore seduction. The system was silent for a while. I thought you were going to scare him to death when you put on makeup. So as to seduce him? Damn it, so many things on your face. And scarier, you can still feel seduction. How thirsty are the men on earth? Wei Wei Bai was also silent. So, that was not seduction. After she went out, she saw that Bai Mu's driver was still waiting. She suddenly smiled at him. With this smile, her eyebrows were slightly raised, and the corners of her eyes were slanted. Her eyebrows and lips were sexy, but there was no sense of tackiness. Bai Mu was stunned. His hand was about to open the back seat door, but halfway through, his whole body froze. Wei Wei Bai kept her smile and very calmly and confidently bent down to enter the car. She did not care at all about how much of an impact she had on others. She said to the system, "Look, I'm still beautiful. How am I scary? It's all because Gu Nanli is short-sighted and can't see my beauty." The system stole a glance at Bai Mu and seemed to sympathize with him. https://www.sashu.com/read the full article. https://www.sashu.com download the full article. https://www.sashu.com read the full article. https://m.sashu.com// to make it easier for you to read it next time. You can click save at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 14:12. Then it said, yes, he's short-sighted. The whole world is short-sighted towards men who have no feelings. Even if it was a system, it could tell that Bai Mu was not short-sighted. A man whose smile could captivate one's heart and soul. It felt that even if there was something wrong with him, he should not be a ruthless character. He was probably a passerby. Therefore, the system lowered its guard against Bai Mu. Bai Mu had already come back to his senses. His heart was beating violently, but he did not dare to show it. He did not even dare to look at Wei Wei Bai. Instead, he carefully closed the door. Then he got into the driver's seat and drove. He did not dare to sneak a look at her anymore. But that smile just now was firmly imprinted in his mind. It cannot be removed. Wei Wei Bai went to the XX office. The staff seemed to have been instructed by someone to be very friendly to her. The application for all kinds of building procedures was very smooth, and the successful application required a process. The staff personally sent her out and kept promising that she would hand in her materials first. Wei Wei Bai sighed. Gu Nanli was so useful. If she had done it herself, relying on the remnants of the Bai family's connections, it would be strange if she did not encounter a lot of uncomfortable things. After all, the underworld forces were a hindrance in the process of whitewashing. On the other hand, the forces outside the dark world could not be built in a short time. When Bai Qi was around, those forces still existed. But Bai Qi did not walk the path of whitewashing, so the connection was not deep. When he died, Wei Wei Bai would have to re-establish this relationship. This kind of large-scale whitewashing process was much more troublesome than purely doing business. After Wei Wei Bai finished these things, it was almost evening, and at dinner time, she had a date. This was not a lie to Gu Nanli, but the date was for business in M country. One of the most important sea routes of Bai Qi's smuggling line was cooperation with M country. Wei Wei Bai planned to deal with this line this time. After all, if she whitewashed it, she would not be able to earn a lot of money from unknown sources. Smuggling was included. She planned to completely sell the dominance of this route to her partner in Country M. The other party seemed to be somewhat dissatisfied with the price and had personally sent their successor to negotiate with her. It was a Japanese restaurant. It was expensive, the service was good, and the most important thing was confidentiality. It was a Japanese-style private room. The waiter opened the door for her with tatami mats and a foreign man in a suit. He was young, handsome, and had a bit of an air about him. His blonde hair and blue eyes made him look slightly frivolous. But there was no doubt that this kind of man was very attractive to women. When Wei Wei Bai entered the door, she was wearing a brownish-red high-waisted V-neck dress and thin high heels. Half of her beautiful collarbone was exposed, and she looked exquisite. Her short hair was neat and tidy, and her red lips were as beautiful as fire. When her eyes moved, there was a hint of coldness. Hello, Mr. Blair. I'm glad you're here. This was because everyone had a tacit understanding not to bring outsiders along. Therefore, in the private room, after the waiters served the dishes, they all left after receiving special instructions. Only the two of them were left in the room. Blair immediately stood up and very enthusiastically gave Wei Wei by a hug. Beautiful lady, I'm also very happy to have met you. I didn't expect you to be so beautiful. He seemed to want to say something else, but it might seem too frivolous and frivolous. // Chapter 14:13. It was changed to childish and straightforward beauty at the last minute. Wei Wei Bai held his hand very indifferently, stopping him from rushing over to hug her. Blair was not a fool. He immediately noticed her rejection. A trace of displeasure flashed in his eyes, but he suppressed it and smiled. If I knew that such a beautiful lady like you wanted to do business, how could I bear to hold you back on the price? The smuggling line in M country was very important, but it was not so important to his family that it was irreplaceable. So Wei Wei Bai asked for a higher price. In fact, if it was by Qi, they would have agreed. In that case, they might have agreed. After all, everyone still had feelings of cooperation. But Bai Qi was dead, and the Bai family was left with an orphan girl. Suddenly, everyone looked down on the Bai family. Wei Wei Bai said indifferently, Mr. Blair, your mouth is really sweet. I also hope that when you do business later, you could be a little merciful to me. Blair suddenly bent down and kissed the back of her hand. Then he said with a smile, Of course, I dare not disobey a beauty's request. Wei Wei Bai immediately withdrew her hand and looked at him coldly. Blair suppressed the burning impulse of seeing a beauty. He was good at everything, but when he saw a beauty, he could not walk the path. And when he saw a woman, he had to get it. Wei Wei Bai asked for a copy of Blair's information from the system. After reading it, she almost ran to disinfect it. A moving stallion. She did not know if he had AIDS. Wei Wei Bai's face turned cold, but she still patiently dealt with him and tried to change the topic to the contract. Seeing that she was so serious, Blair felt embarrassed to keep talking glibly. He could only temporarily suppress his desire and start the negotiation. Time passed little by little. Because of the details of the contract, Wei Wei Bai did not notice that it was late at night. For distinguished guests, even if they sat until tomorrow morning, they would not close the shop and disturb them. Gu Nanli had already picked up his phone and directly dialed Wei Wei Bai's cell phone number. Compared to the first hesitation, now, he was very indifferent. After all, he had paid the price for her to sleep with him. It was almost 11 o'clock now. It was a dereliction of duty for her not to come. The call went to Bai Weiwei's cell phone, but because of the contract negotiations, Bai Weiwei left the phone in the car. Bai Mu was resting with his eyes closed. He was a little irritated. His mind was filled with Wei Wei Bai, even though he clearly knew that this was wrong of him. However, he was still unable to control it. It was as if he was possessed. Bai Mu suddenly heard his phone ring. It was Wei Wei Bai. He picked it up and saw that it was Gu Nanli's. Bai Mu's eyes immediately turned cold. He thought about how Wei Wei Bai had been spending the night at Gu Nanli's place these past few days. He felt that Wei Wei Bai had become Gu Nanli's mistress. This thought tormented him and made him jealous. He hung up the phone fiercely. When Gu Nanli heard the sound of the phone hanging up, his eyes turned cold. Thinking of what she said this morning before she left? A date? A date for the whole day? Gu Nanli put down his phone and leaned against the chair expressionlessly. Then, he closed his eyes and rested. Perhaps it was because he had been sleeping at about the same time for the past few days, and he had to sleep with good quality sleep, so his vigilance was relaxed for a moment. He actually dozed off. However, after a while, his forehead was sweating and his whole body was trembling. Gu Nanli suddenly opened his eyes. His breathing was messy. He suddenly reached out and covered his neck. He had a feeling of discomfort and wanted to vomit. Chapter 14:14. This was the nightmare he was used to. But today, after such a short period of nightmare, after he struggled to wake up, he couldn't adapt to this situation. He tasted the sweet, dreamless sleep. When he returned to the terrible nightmare, he was more embarrassed and in pain than ever before. Gu Nanli's eyes were red, and he was panting like an injured beast. He held the armrest tightly in silence. Suddenly, he got up, picked up his coat, and walked out. The subordinate outside the door came over respectfully. "Mr. Gu, are you going out?" Gu Nanli said coldly. "To pick someone up." The subordinate immediately ordered the driver to drive, and then asked carefully, "Who are you picking up?" Gu Nanli glanced at him coldly, as if she was blaming him for not knowing what to do. Under the subordinate's fearful attitude, Gu Nanli finally said unwillingly, "Wei Wei Bai." After saying that, he got into the car, his eyes cold. Those who didn't know would think that he was going to kill someone, not pick someone up. Regarding the contract, Bai Weiwei obtained a satisfactory price under Blair's intentional disregard. But she was very vigilant and let the system be on guard as well. If there was anything wrong with this idiot, she would directly make him impotent. The system indicated that this could be done. It had already started to look through the discount section to see if there were any sharp weapons to cut the hook. At this time, the waiter opened the door again. He was here to exchange for food and wine. Wei Wei Bai knew that there was something fishy. The system also said there are hallucinogens and strong excitants in the wine. Excitants, aren't they aphrodisiacs? Wei Wei Bai looked coldly at Blair's excited face. She smiled coldly and was about to let the system cut the hook. The system suddenly said, "The male lead is here, and the car is already parked in front of the restaurant." Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment. Only a favorability of 0. Gu Nanli couldn't have come because he missed her. Suddenly, she looked at the time in the room. It was past 11 o'clock. It was close to 9 when she arrived for the appointment. Adding up the time spent chatting with this idiot and signing the contract, it was already late at night. Was Gu Nanli here to catch her, an employee who was late for sleeping with him? Bai Weiwei's mind nimbly turned in a circle. She suddenly smiled and warmed up. "Mr. Burrell, thank you very much for your willingness to make this trip, and thank you for giving me such a satisfactory price. This glass of wine is my thanks to you." After saying that, she picked up the glass of spiked wine and downed it in front of Burrell. Burrell's eyes lit up, and a greedy and sinister desire appeared in his eyes. He said hypocritically, "Miss Bai is too polite. Let me toast you as well." Then the two of them drank a few glasses of wine. Burrell was extremely excited. He watched as Wei Wei Bai's face turned red from the impact of the wine. It was gorgeous and alluring. He had already bribed the waiter. Wei Wei Bai's bottle of sake was filled with drugs, a drug that could make one want to die. No matter how cold and arrogant she was, she still had to get into his bed. As for what would happen afterwards, he was afraid of what would happen. Would she dare to publicize it? The Bai family was now in ruins, and she was alone. How could she fight with him and his family? Burrell was not an idiot. He played with women to see if he could provoke them. Although Wei Wei Bai was a bit tricky, she was definitely within the range that he could afford to provoke. Wei Wei Bai suddenly felt dizzy. The wine glass in her hand fell to the tatami, and she looked at Burrell strangely. Slash. Slash. Chapter 14:15. Was there a fight inside? His indifferent heart trembled slightly, but it was not enough to shake his incomparably cold heart. His footsteps were still so calm as he walked forward. Inside the door, Brer had already raised his hand to ruthlessly slap Wei Wei Bai's face. "Who do you think I am? I can kill you as easily as killing an ant. You should be honored that a man like me is willing to sleep with you." This sentence made Gu Nanli, who was about to reach out and push open the door to the private room, pause. In the next second, a tragic cry came from inside the door. The porcelain in Wei Wei Bai's hand had already ruthlessly pierced into Brer's palm. Before his slap could fall, Wei Wei Bai had already crippled his hand. Wei Wei Bai was dizzy, but the system threw down a 2-day health potion that could support 3 minutes of sobriety, making her full of energy. The porcelain in her hand was firmly fixed in his palm, pressing him onto the table. Brer's miserable cries did not affect her performance in the slightest. She looked at him incomparably coldly. A few traces of blood stained her cheeks, making her even more gorgeous. She said, "Sorry, sir, you are not qualified to sleep with me. After all, I am very picky. I have no interest in a white-skinned, yellow-haired monkey." Brer looked at her in disbelief. Why hadn't she softened? The drug was obviously so heavy. Everyone did not carry weapons. Wei Wei Bai grabbed another piece of broken porcelain and ruthlessly slashed at his chest with the sharp end. Blood gushed out, and flesh turned over. Brer convulsed. Then Wei Wei Bai threw away the porcelain. Her hands were full of tragic wounds made by the porcelain, and she left the table. Her small skirt was torn, and there were small wounds on her shining white thighs that were cut by the shards on the table. The back of her skirt had already been torn open, hanging shakily behind her. Her beautiful and sexy shoulder blades, her delicate snow-white back, and small blood beads emerged, red and white intertwined to form an extremely tragic beauty. Seductive. The door of the private room, behind him, was already open. Gunamli saw her back facing him. Her hands were bleeding, and her back looked like it was missing a pair of wings. His entire body was covered in blood, and he was as sharp as a knife, and soft and beautiful. Gunamli's pupils shrank, and he felt like something was about to burst out of his chest. There was no time to think. Wei Wei Bai had already sensed that there was someone behind her. She slowly turned her head, and there were traces of blood on her snow-white cheeks. When he turned around, his eyes were clear and cold, without the slightest trace of fear and panic after surviving calamity. Instead, it was cold, sharp, and seductive. Suddenly, she slowly revealed a smile. Ridicule and disdain appeared in her eyes at the same time. Then, she slowly walked forward. Step by step, she swayed as she walked forward slowly. "Mr. Blair, do you know what kind of man is qualified to be with me?" As Wei Wei Bai walked, she carelessly touched her face with her wounded fingers. Her blood-stained face gave off a devilishly cold feeling. She lazily flipped her short hair and stared at Gunamli without moving her eyes. His eyes were like a black pool without any ripples. They were imprinted with a little light, extremely beautiful. But with her footsteps, his eyes gradually couldn't be suppressed. A kind of blood boiling, like a needle pricking, made his back a little numb. When Wei Wei Bai's blood-stained fingers touched his cheek, he didn't move. Then he saw her whole body burning hot with the smell of blood. She was like a seriously injured little beast that had successfully hunted, sticking close to him. She whispered, "The man who is qualified to be with me is here." Gunamli only felt that these words were like her blood, making his body couldn't help but heat up. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 5. Chapter 14:16. Wei Wei Bai's sobriety drug was about to wear off. Her breathing became heavy, and her eyes were filled with lust. Her bloodied fingers caressed his fair skin. The blood red left traces of demonic charm on his face, making his already gloomy appearance appear even more oppressive and cold. But there was a sharp and burning desire to attack in his eyes when he looked at her. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were a little dazed. She gently leaned against him and slowly placed her hand on his shoulder. Suddenly, she sighed and said in his ear, "Mr. Gu, I'm tired." She had just experienced an extremely thrilling battle after being tortured by high-intensity drugs. The man who had molested her was now lying on the table moaning, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Her bloodthirsty and ruthless appearance completely aroused the excited nerves in his body. There had never been an opponent like her. Just by standing there, she could arouse his morbid desire to fight. In fact, there was even a sinister and secretive stimulus that he ignored that made his back go numb. But she could still calmly lean against him and say that she was tired. Gunamli reached out and touched her shoulder. There was blood on it too. It was caused by the shards. His eyes, which were red from excitement, turned cold. Through Wei Wei Bai's beautiful and round shoulder, he saw Brer struggling on the table and bleeding all over the floor. Then he lowered his eyes. His beautiful eyelashes trembled, and the murderous intent in his cold eyes surged. "Don't let him die." With that said, he firmly held her shoulder, and the shards pierced deeper into her flesh. She shook violently, and the blood stained Gunamli's fingers. In the next moment, Gunamli had already picked her up and turned to leave. The bodyguard behind him swarmed forward and dragged Briar away. They didn't care about his identity or his family background. Although the sobriety drug had worn off, Wei Wei Bai had faced everything before. She could still endure the torture of the aphrodisiac. It was the anesthetic that made her unable to move, and she was already seeing double. This was the effect of the hallucinogen. A faint smile appeared on her lips. Then, her breathing became erratic, but her tone was still calm and cunning. Mr. Gu, he's a collaborator from M Country. I heard that Blair is the successor of their family. If you rush in like this and take him away, you'll offend the people from M Country. Gu Nanli had already seen his car. He walked over expressionlessly, and his subordinate immediately opened the door for him. He bent over and carefully held on to Wei Wei Bai so that she would not feel too uncomfortable. When he sat in his seat, the car started to move. Only then did he say, "This is not what you wish for." Wei Wei Bai and Blair could sense it. If Brel had only come to buy the smuggling line, then Wei Wei Bai would have gotten a lot of money. This business could be considered to be very successful. Even if Burrell had the intention to sleep with Wei Wei Bai, he would not be able to sleep with her. Wei Wei Bai's best choice now was to agree, because that was the only way to obtain the greatest benefits. After all, the people in the underworld were indifferent to such matters. More women than men, and more women than men. Most of them did not matter. Strength was everything. 1 or 2 times a pleasure was too insignificant. But he did not expect that she would even do something like murder. Even if Blair was not dead, he was almost crippled. He had a deep hatred for Wei Wei Bai, and her actions just now were undoubtedly telling Blair that he was her man and the biggest power behind her. Chapter 14:17. Breer's body stiffened as he looked at him in disbelief. Didn't Wei Wei Bai have no backing? The Bai family had lost Bai Qi. With Wei Wei Bai's appearance of not wanting to mingle in the underworld and only wanting to get away as soon as possible, he didn't need to put in much effort to bully her. But if she was Gu Nanli's woman, his body trembled. Although his family was powerful, that was in M Country. The territory here was not his, but Gu Nanli's. If it weren't for Wei Wei Bai's sudden appearance, the Bai family's property would probably have fallen into Gu Nanli's hands. Then, the overlord of the underworld would probably be in the bag. Even if she didn't get the Bai family's property, with what Gu Nanli had now, she was the new aristocratic family that had risen the fastest, had the most ruthless and smart methods, and had the most territory in the dark world in the past 20 years. This kind of man, even if it was his family, they mainly relied on winning him over and did not dare to offend him too much. Everyone knew how ruthless and terrifying this kind of person who climbed from nothing to such a position was. This was not something that they, the successors who grew up safely under the protection of their families, could compare to. So if Gu Nanli really killed him, his family far away in M Country might give up on revenge in the end, because benefits were eternal. As long as the benefits were enough, giving up an heir was nothing to his family. And Gu Nanli was undoubtedly a man who could give enough benefits. After thinking through most of it, Breer's expression turned ugly. There was a hint of fear in his eyes. "I didn't know it was your people. I thought you had a grudge against the Bai family." Who didn't know that Gu Nanli was going to seize the Bai family's property in the name of revenge? Who would have thought that it had only been a few days? Wei Wei Bai had already hooked up with him? Didn't they say that Gu Nanli didn't want men and women? All these years, what kind of stunning beauty and stunner were sent to him? They were all bought by him. He didn't even touch them or look at them. Everyone in the circle thought that he was impotent. No one would have thought that a person like him would have a mistress. Gu Nanli placed the teacup on the table, then slowly got up and walked to Breer's side. Burrell's forehead was covered in sweat as he repeatedly said, "I can give you the Bai family's smuggling line for free. I only ask that you let me go this time." Gu Nanli shook his head. "I'm not going to trade the person in my bed for such a trivial benefit." He had already said that she belonged to him. He was the only one who could bully him. If anyone touched it, their hands would be chopped off. The depth of feelings was related to a man's dignity. At the end of the day, Gu Nanli still had some old-fashioned ideas. He disdained to exchange women for benefits. After Gu Nanli finished speaking, he raised his hand, and his subordinate immediately handed him a knife. It was a sharp boning knife. The tip of the knife flashed with a cold light that made one's scalp numb. Burrell's pupils shrank as fear crawled onto his face. He said in a trembling voice, "If you want to kill me, then kill me. Do you want me to suffer a fate worse than death?" There were many ways to torture people in the underworld. Direct death was a kind of easy gift, and Gunanli clearly did not intend to let him die so easily. Gunanli's hands were very white. He had always been very white. His skin was even fairer and more beautiful than a woman's. As a result, his fingers were as slender as snow. The way he held the knife was poetic and beautiful, but the words he softly muttered to himself gave people goosebumps. I counted how many wounds there were on her body. There were shallow cuts and deep cuts that would leave scars. I dug out those pieces of porcelain one by one. Chapter 14:18. When he was treating her wounds in the early morning, he counted them one by one. They weren't fatal wounds. They were all small scars that didn't seem important at all and could even be ignored. But they were an eyesore to him. After all, her skin was better than his, and she applied so many skincare products. So he felt that if she left a scar, it would be a loss. After all, she was so vain. Gunanli was a possessive person. Even if his feelings for Wei Wei Bai were complicated, and of course, they weren't deep, as long as there was a trace of secret desire, he wouldn't let others touch her. If they touched her, he would get it back. Gunanli gently placed the knife on Blair's leg and said gently, "It should be in this position." Just as he finished speaking, the tip of the knife stabbed down. Blair screamed. The bodyguards guarding outside the door and watching from inside the door were all expressionless. It was as if it was just a normal day. And Gunanli also very calmly cleaned up Blair from head to toe. Then he threw the knife, and his subordinate immediately brought a basin of water. He lowered his head and carefully washed his hands. The blood on his fingers slowly dissipated into the water, turning into light red water. Gunanli dried his hands. His fair fingers were as clean as before. Then Gunanli said, "He's still alive. Send him back to M country. In the future, we won't accept any business from their family." With a simple sentence, he completely went against the biggest power in M country. Then he didn't care if he looked like an incapable ruler who was bewitched by a woman. He walked out with a calm expression. When he returned home, he saw that Wei Wei Bai was still lying on the bed. She was looking bored, counting nail polish bottles. A small box of colorful nail polish glass bottles looked pleasing to the eye. The premise was that they didn't touch her hands or feet. She gently supported her chin with one hand as she lay on the bed. Her hand was bandaged, and she could only use her fingertips to gently tap the bottle. Her back was injured the most. Therefore, lying on his stomach was actually the most comfortable position. Wei Wei Bai glanced at Gunanli lazily. "Mr. Gu, you're back. Looks like you're full of energy." After tormenting her for an entire night, he could still torment others early in the morning. Moreover, he seemed to be in good spirits. He was indeed full of energy. Gunanli stood at the door. His gaze rested on the beautiful lines of her back. Gradually, his gaze moved downwards. He saw her fair and beautiful feet and casually bent them. She was wearing his white shirt. Under the loose shirt, she looked like she was wearing nothing. And because she was wearing his clothes, he could feel how petite she was. His clothes hung loosely on her like a child stealing an adult's clothes. Gunanli's eyes darkened. Then he looked away, walked to the bed, and put away all the nail polish bottles. Wei Wei Bai quickly stopped her. "I only have this hobby. Are you going to take it away from me?" It was boring to lie in bed with nothing to do. Gunanli cruelly snatched the last bottle of nail polish from her hand. "Don't apply this in the future. It's ugly." The color of her nails was very pretty. Why did she have to go the extra mile to make her nails ugly? Wei Wei Bai was speechless. She raised her bandaged hand. "How is it pretty? Look at this dumpling hand." Gunanli looked down and saw her fingertips peeking out from the white bandage. Her pink fingernails had a healthy glow. The little lotus had just revealed its sharp edges. It was a very elegant and beautiful pair of hands. Slash. Chapter 14:19. Wei Wei Bai lay on his stomach helplessly. It was very painful to sleep with him. While Bai Wei Wei was recuperating, the days passed unhurriedly. Her wounds were not deep, and the doctor's medicine was the best. After a week of recuperation and removing the bandages, Her skin was mostly healed except for some deeper wounds and scars. Wei Wei Bai had been detained by Gu Nanli for a week and could not go anywhere. She complained, "Mr. Gu, are you going to imprison me?" Gu Nanli looked at her indifferently. "So what if I am?" It was so simple and so rough. Wei Wei Bai was not angry, as though she felt that being angry would not change anything. "Why do you want to imprison me? To sleep with me or to sleep with you?" Gu Nanli was filling in some documents. His beautiful fingers held the pen as he looked at the documents. "Both. You are very useful. To appease his irritable mood and to let him get enough sleep. Also, to let him experience the greatest pleasure of a man in bed. If there was a woman who could let him get all these, he would not even mind marrying her." Of course, the premise was that she was not Wei Wei Bai. Unfortunately, all these were given to him by Wei Wei Bai. He did not hate her now, but he would not love her. When Gu Nanli's rationality took over, he was unusually cold. The messy thoughts in his heart were suppressed by rationality. Bai Wei Wei and him exchanging identities was what he hated the most. He hated her so much that he tried his best not to vent his anger on Wei Wei Bai. This was already his limit. As for the rest, he would not give her anything more. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were cold, but her smile was even brighter. "Why do I feel like I'm at a disadvantage? You know, when I signed the contract to warm your bed, it did not include daytime or even to serve your desires." Gu Nanli finally looked at her and pulled out a check from the folder. "Fill in the number. I know you want to enter the real estate industry. You've dealt with the Bai family's shady smuggling lines and dark business." He was in such a hurry to get rid of it because he wanted to get enough money to enter the legal industry. All of Bai Chi's shameful wealth was washed clean. However, the after effects caused her influence to become exceptionally weak. She was too impatient, causing some of the elders of the Bai clan to not be optimistic and even start to rebel against her. He helped her get rid of all these difficulties. It even helped her to clear her name even faster. If he wanted to cultivate an opponent, he should stop her and let her continue to grow until she had the ability to fight with him. But ever since he got her, he kept trying to clear her name. Because of this, he was able to crush her forces in the dark world, leaving her with no power to fight against him. Gu Nanli just followed his instincts. But today, after hearing her question, he finally understood his own thoughts after coldly helping her to clear her name. He felt that. She was more exciting to him as his mistress than as his opponent. Wei Wei Bai's smile gradually disappeared. She reached out and picked up the check. Her fingers were clean, without nail polish. Then she picked up the pen and wrote on it. After writing, she took the check in her hand and suddenly slapped Gu Nanli's face with the check. Gu Nanli's face tilted and immediately turned red. The check also fell to the ground lightly. It said, "Fuck you." Gu Nanli was stunned for a moment. He looked at the check and then looked up at her. To read the full article at https://www.sashu.com to read on. .com/. Chapter 14:20. However, he saw the fire in her eyes. She sneered angrily. "Gu Nanli, I only know that you have no contract spirit. I want to accompany you if you want to raise a canary. I'll sleep with you, but I don't intend to sell my body." After saying that, she suddenly took out a piece of paper from the side and wrote a number on it. She wrote an IOU directly. Come. Let's count how many times you've slept with me. Your skills are so bad. 100 times is considered high. Here, 1,500. Wei Wei Bai threw the IOU in front of him. Okay, don't say that you're the one at a disadvantage. I've already paid for sleeping with you. In the future, we'll go our separate ways. I won't change the contract at the last minute and do business with a man who says that he wants to imprison me. She stood up and looked at him from above. Anyway, there are so many collaborators. There are so many people taking over the Bai family's businesses. You're not the only one. Gu Nanli sat down, one side of his face swollen from the slap. He was expressionless and his eyes were gloomy. Seeing that she had turned to leave, he stared at her back for a while before slowly getting up and kicking over the table in anger. Wei Wei Bai stopped in her tracks. Before she could react, the man behind her was like a beast out of its cage. He clasped her hands and pressed her against the door. He leaned over, his breath so hot that it made Wei Wei Bai's ears tingle. You're not the only one? You're wrong. Other than me, no one dares to take over your mess. Wei Wei Bai's eyes turned cold. Gu Namli, are you going to fall out with me? Gu Namli laughed out loud. Fall out? We've always been enemies. What face do we have to fall out with? If it weren't for my indulgence, you would have gone to the netherworld to report to the king of hell with your life. His lips were close to the tip of her thin ear, and he said cruelly, You're relying on my sick hobby to become my opponent. That's why you dare to be so willful. His problem of getting excited when he saw a strong opponent. She had long cured it, because when he looked at her now, he was no longer looking at her as a delicious future opponent. It was a woman who made him unable to walk the path. She hadn't realized that her body was more attractive to him than her abilities. That was why she lost. He wanted to imprison her, oppress her, and prevent her from leaving this place. Not to mention making her stronger. Gu Namli noticed that she was trembling with fear and anger. He chuckled softly. A rabbit is still a rabbit. You just returned to your original form, Wei Wei Bai. She was not Bai Chi's child at all. He was definitely no match for him. Wei Wei Bai suddenly kicked at his calf, but he lowered his knee and blocked her attack. At the same time, he pulled her into his arms. Then, he threw her on the bed. Wei Wei Bai felt dizzy. Gu Namli pressed the check in her hand. I'll give you whatever you want in the future. It's okay to play with real estate. I'll clean up the Bai family's mess for you. I'll make you lose everything. After a pause, the man revealed a sinister but cute smile. Except for having me. Once a man had sex, he would start to lose his head. He was going to take it by force. Bai Weiwei's eyes were cold and gloomy. She clenched the check one by one. Gu Namli, are you serious? Gu Namli didn't answer. Instead, he stared at her intently for a while, his fingers gently touching her beautiful face. Then he lowered his head, bit her lips, and kissed her deeply. This was the first time he went back on his word. The first time he tore up the contract. And the first time he wanted to build a cage to raise a bird. Was he serious? Gu Namli was immersed in her soft and sweet breath. He finally admitted it. He was serious. It had nothing to do with love, but he just wanted to hold her. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 20. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. 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 / transmigration system. Male god, come here, comma. Chapter 1421. Wei Wei Bai rubbed her chin helplessly, thinking about what went wrong when she was flirting with Gu Namli. Wouldn't people like Gu Namli start to become perverted when they see a strong opponent and then become very excited? She was basically trying to provoke him to death, to let him know that she was very good, very perfect. Given some time, she would definitely be able to soar into the sky and become his destined opponent. After all, she had a lifetime to deal with him, so she couldn't leave early. If she had to sulk for the rest of her life, she might as well give him a year and a half to deal with him. After all, sulking for a year and a half was already torturous enough. If she sulked for the rest of her life, she might even go on strike. Moreover, if she really thought that being a canary could fill up the favorability points, she was willing to give it a try. However, Gu Namli was a man who would not budge unless he was hit. If she allowed him to lock her up, if she let him be at ease, the favorability points wouldn't move. She didn't see that. Damn it, how many times did she do that? But the favorability points didn't increase at all. It was still 20. Except for the first time, she gave 5 points of favorability points. As for the remaining 5 points, they could just randomly increase it. Just 1 point of favorability points didn't increase. Was Gu Namli a robot? It was so intense, so many beautiful nights. It turned him from a young virgin to an experienced driver with many tricks. Even if there was no credit, there should be a reward for hard work. What did it mean by not increasing at all? Wei Wei Bai touched the system's face that had become fat from eating snacks. I still have to do something. Without something to do, I feel that my life is incomplete. Most importantly, if she didn't torment Gu Namli, she wouldn't have a sense of crisis. Without a sense of crisis, she wouldn't be able to increase the favorability points by 3 points in her life. The system ate the cheapest dried watermelon and said, "How do you want to torment me?" The host went from a mentally retarded character to a little white flower character to a pretentious and pretentious character until now. It would be abnormal if she didn't torment him. Therefore, the system very calmly let her torment him. It had also grown up. At first, when it saw such a host, it really wanted to pick her up and throw her into the trash can. Mentally retarded little white flower, are you done being pretentious? I've been blinded so many times, and I've vomited a ton. Do you know that? Seeing you is like encountering a trash can at the corner of a corner. Even kicking it away would be an eyesore. Of course, that was in the past. It was very calm now. It couldn't be helped. The snacks were delicious. Wei Wei Bai thought for a moment and said, "Why don't we murder and usurp the throne?" The system replied, "You're not strong enough." Now that she was locked up, she had no access to weapons at all. None of the bodyguards carried guns, for fear that she would steal them. Who asked her to show off her skills? Now, everyone in the underworld knew that her ability to dismantle weapons was top-notch. Even Gu Nanli could not compare to her. So how could Gu Nanli not guard against her? Without a weapon, her combat strength was nothing in front of Gu Nanli. Wei Wei Bai said, "That's true. Then let's think of another way." Just as Wei Wei Bai was racking her brains to come up with a strategy for the future, Gu Nanli had just finished dealing with some important matters and walked in, covered in blood. He habitually glanced at the woman on the sofa. He saw that she casually placed her bare feet on the ground. Her toes were clean, and there was no nail polish. She had a bored look on her face, holding her chin and reading the news. Her lazy appearance was like a big, cute cat. She was distant, but it made people want to get close to her. Chapter 14:22. Gu Nanli stared at it for a few seconds before he went into the bathroom to take a shower. When he came out of the shower, he was wearing a bathrobe. Wei Wei Bai couldn't be bothered to look at him. She flipped through the fashion magazine casually, as if the colorful fashions in the magazine were more attractive to her than Gu Nanli's long legs. Gu Nanli's black hair was dripping wet. Water droplets fell from his chin into the open bathrobe, revealing a large patch of his fair and strong chest. He looked at her deeply and suddenly handed her the white towel in his hand. Wei Wei Bai looked at him strangely and said in disdain, "Are you handicapped? Can't you wipe it yourself?" Gu Nanli said, "You're my woman. This is what you should do." Wei Wei Bai, did Gu Nanli's brain transmigrate from the end of the Qing dynasty? Men who dared to say such things were all single dogs. No, even dogs knew how to be considerate. How was he worthy of that? Gu Nanli said, "You wipe it. I'll take you on a date." Wei Wei Bai, the atmosphere was awkward. In the end, Wei Wei Bai didn't want to talk to this idiot in love anymore. She took the towel and gestured for him to sit down. Then, she covered his head with the towel. She used the strength of the staff at the barber shop to serve customers who didn't buy annual membership cards. She wiped his hair with both hands like a storm. Wipe, wipe, wipe. It would be best if she wiped his hair until he was bald. Gu Nanli didn't move at all. No matter how she wiped his hair, he was calm. His hair was like a chicken coop. It was the shape of a hurricane. Wei Wei Bai saw that his neck was also wet. She put the towel on his neck. Her fair fingers pressed on the towel, and her actions became gentle. She gently wiped his Adam's apple and pulled back the towel. This was a dangerous action. As long as the two ends of the towel were crossed and tightly strangled, he could be strangled to death. Wei Wei Bai's eyes became dangerous. Her fingers slowly crossed the towel. As long as she exerted a strong force, she would not relax. Perhaps he could kill Gu Nanli. Gu Nanli was expressionless, as if he did not notice her murderous intent. On the other hand, Wei Wei Bai lowered her eyelashes. Her eyes were cold and beautiful. Her slender fingers were slowly exerting force. Gu Nanli's eyes gradually darkened. He looked at her indifferently. His eyelashes were still a little wet, and his dark hair was messy on his forehead. The youth's clean aura made his indifference a little more soft. This gave Wei Wei Bai an illusion. He used himself as bait to lure her into killing him. Then, when she was careless and made a move, he ruthlessly killed her. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while. Then she let go of the towel, got up, and left without any reluctance. She did not carry on with the murder. But before she could walk away, a pair of hands clasped her waist and pulled her into a familiar, wet embrace. Gunanli's hand held the back of her neck. He lowered his head and kissed her fragile neck. His teeth almost grazed her snow-white skin, leaving an ambiguous red mark. "Why didn't you continue to strangle me?" He was waiting for her to make a move. Then, he would let her know that she was no match for him in terms of strength, making her even more desperate. Wei Wei Bai's face was indifferent. "What good would it do to strangle you? I intend to make you suffer a fate worse than death." Gunanli's kiss paused, and he suddenly laughed. His warm breath licked her collarbone. "I'll wait. If I didn't have feelings for you, you would indeed be an opponent that I would be very interested in." It was as if everything about her was made for him by heaven. Chapter 1423. All of his hobbies could be found in her. There shouldn't be a second person in this world who perfectly matched his hobbies like Wei Wei Bai. So he would rather raise her like a bird. He didn't want her to fly. As for whether Wei Wei Bai hated him or not, he didn't care at all. He didn't care about her opinion at all. As for making him wish he was dead, she didn't have the ability. Not today, but in the future, he wouldn't give her the chance. Gunanli kissed her cold eyes. Both of them had the same cold heart, but their bodies warmed up when they touched each other. She seemed to want to resist. He clasped her hands tightly and crushed her resistance bit by bit. Gunanli really did give her a list of dates when she said she wanted to go on a date. She took a look. The top floor of a top-notch romantic XX date restaurant, giving roses and playing the violin. Luxurious VIP cinema box, double love movie experience. Extravagant yacht with fireworks for a night trip. Rich people's dates were very good, expensive, and uncreative. Wei Wei Bai lost interest just looking at the list of dates. But Gunanli was very calm and very determined. He wanted to drag her on a date. After all, he was the one who promised to go on a date after drying her hair. Although Wei Wei Bai felt that he was the one who wanted to go on a date. After all, this man looked like he had never been on a date before. Look at how much he was looking forward to it in a suit and tie. Gunanli tidied his hair. His slender body was dressed in a black suit. His delicate and handsome face had a hint of gloominess, and his eyes were cold. He elegantly tugged at his collar, then turned around and said, "After the date, I'll arrange a company for you tomorrow for you to practice your skills." She liked the business in the white market. He gave it to her. He was the only one who could give it to her. This was different from her own business. What he gave was, of course, under his supervision. Wei Wei Bai sneered. "If you say so, then so be it. I'll take it." This indifferent attitude was filled with mockery. For some reason, Gunanli felt a little uncomfortable. He shouldn't be too concerned about her emotions. Gunanli endured the strange discomfort, then held her hand and walked out. Wei Wei Bai was taken to a date by Gunanli. The restaurant experience was very good, and the violin was very nice. The food was delicious too. After dinner, Gunanli gave her a bouquet of red roses. Wei Wei Bai took it expressionlessly. The roses were small, so it was not troublesome to hold them with one hand. She wondered why Gunanli was so interested in such a boring date. Gunanli didn't know where the faint excitement in his heart came from. He held her soft fingers and ate a candlelit dinner with her. He had always found this kind of experience boring. Even in the beginning, it was only because she followed him. Even if she was a canary, she should be the noble one. That was why he saw that other people's mistresses were doing well. He felt that these little dates were what he should give. But he didn't expect that when it came to the date, he would be even more excited than her. Although he was excited, his favorability didn't increase. Wei Wei Bai always felt that she had forgotten something, which caused Gunanli's favorability to not increase. Generally speaking, the target's favorability would not increase. Then there must be some obstacle that she didn't know. So no matter how she tried to attack, he was indifferent. He even suppressed his feelings. /TXD. Chapter 1424. Wei Wei Bai thought of the side mission that was related to her. It was obviously the mystery of Gunanli's birth, but it was related to her. What role did she play in the mystery of his birth? Wei Wei Bai watched the movie while carefully looking for clues, trying hard to uncover the mystery of Gunanli's birth. As she thought about it, her eyes went blank. When her hand was clasped by Gu Nanli, she suddenly came back to her senses. However, she saw Gu Nanli looking at her expressionlessly. Don't you like this movie? Wei Wei Bai looked at the movie lazily. I like it. Although the female lead is uglier than me, the plot is not bad, especially when the male lead is hung up and beaten. It's the most exciting part. The plot happened to come to the scene where the male lead saved the damsel in distress and was hung up and whipped by the villain. However, this story was a sentimental love story between the male and female leads. Gu Nanli thought that women would like this kind of movie. Didn't they say that many people cried after watching this movie? It would be inhumane to say that they didn't cry. It seemed that he and Wei Wei Bai were inhumane. The little bit of excitement in Gu Nanli's heart was almost extinguished by her cold gaze. He stood up, but because he used too much strength, he pulled Wei Wei Bai's hand and hurt it. Wei Wei Bai was too lazy to be perfunctory. She flung his hand away fiercely and took back her hand. Okay, is a yacht date next? Hurry up and finish it. I'm going back to sleep. There was an indescribable impatience and even disgust. Gu Nanli was stunned for a moment. Although he quickly regained his composure, the look of disgust in her eyes had undoubtedly hurt him. He was used to tolerating it, but he still felt uncomfortable. He even felt a little embarrassed. It was as if he had put in so much effort to bring her out on a date, but he didn't get anything good out of it. He felt a sense of failure. What he hated the most was failure. But he thought the engagement was of no importance, and that he should not have frowned in the least whether it was a failure or not. Wei Wei Bai glanced at the movie. It was a happy ending. She sneered and walked out without hesitation. Gu Nanli could grab her back, but for some reason, his footsteps were a little anxious to catch up with her. Outside the cinema was a black extended Rolls-Royce. Gu Nanli did not usually drive this car. Perhaps he had bought it for a date. After all, no one would usually use this kind of car, except for Hollywood stars who went on the red carpet. Wei Wei Bai looked at the car coldly, as if she wanted to go around it and leave. Gu Nanli had already walked behind her and pulled her arm. He opened the door and stuffed her into the car, as if he was afraid that she would run away. Of course, Wei Wei Bai had no intention of running away. After all, there were many of Gu Nanli's men around the car. She would be invited back after a few steps. The atmosphere in the car was terrifyingly silent. Gu Nanli's expression was calm. He held her hand and touched her fingertips unhurriedly. Her fingers were clean, and her fingernails were not polished. It was very beautiful, and it was very in line with his aesthetic standards. It was only in line with his standards. For Wei Wei Bai, staying by his side was a terrible torture. But he did not care. Gu Nanli suddenly said, "Do you know why I arranged this date today?" Wei Wei Bai's cold eyes did not change. "You can arrange whatever you want. What's the use if I know why?" Gu Nanli did not care about her sarcasm. Instead, he said lightly, "Today is the 100th day we have known each other. Is at https://www.sashu.com//. Chapter 1425. He had imprisoned her for at least 2 months. Wei Wei Bai's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise, as if she couldn't understand why he would remember this kind of date. It was as ridiculous as a real couple. Gu Nanli chuckled softly. "We've known each other for 100 days. Shouldn't we celebrate? I even prepared a gift for you. A check for 100 million yuan. You should like money the most now." After all, giving money was the most practical. Wei Wei Bai, no. She liked favorability the most. What was the use of giving money? All right, 100 million yuan was really too much. This gift was insanely beautiful. Wei Wei Bai smiled faintly. Then she saw a hint of excitement and joy flash in Gu Nanli's eyes. Her smile deepened. "It's a 100-day anniversary. Why don't I give you a gift too, Gu Nanli?" The excitement in Gu Nanli's heart was aroused again. She even felt that the date was more interesting than before. The last stop was the yacht fireworks. It was an old-fashioned and expensive project. The yacht left the sea and stopped on the calm and sparkling surface of the sea. The staff had already started to arrange the positions of the fireworks to show the best shape. Wei Wei Bai leaned against the railing and looked at a place not far from the shore. "Gu Nanli, that seems to be the East District's pier. Why are you so busy so late? Gunanli was in a rare mood to relax. He was opening the cork of a wine bottle and explained, "Tonight is the handover day. Some more special items will be transferred out." This was a more conservative way of saying it. There was a big business happening at that port today. It was his business with Europe and America. This was one of his main ways of earning money, and he would do it once a month. If something happened at the port, it would be very troublesome, so he was very rational to stop the yacht here. While dating, he could also monitor the situation at the opposite port at the same time. Wei Wei Bai said casually, "Looks like you're doing a good business." Gunanli poured a glass of champagne. He wasn't too excited and only said indifferently, "This is just the beginning. It will get better in the future." It was a very normal sentence. However, not everyone dared to say such words. It would be better in the future. Who knows? Wei Wei Bai leaned against the railing and looked at the harbor not far away. Her fingers gently touched the railing as if she was waiting for something. Gunanli had already walked to her side and brought a glass of champagne to her lips. The cold edge of the glass made Wei Wei Bai frown. His body was close to hers, and the warmth of his breath blew on her face. "Drink some wine, you'll feel warmer." Wei Wei Bai had no objections. After taking the cup, she very naturally took a few steps back, sticking closer to the railing, but not getting close to Gunanli. She had a smile at the corner of her mouth. It looked casual, but it wasn't to the extent of being happy. It was just a polite, fake smile. "Gunanli, aren't you afraid that I'll stab you in the back one day? I really don't like to be a canary." She spoke the truth. Gunanli poured a glass of wine for himself and glanced at her with a rare smile in his eyes. He said, "Just by you." It wasn't that he was looking down on her, but it took time to grow. If he was like her at the same time, at the same starting point, he would also be a stray dog now. So it wasn't that Wei Wei Bai wasn't strong, but that he and she grew up at different times. When he was growing up, he didn't meet anyone who wanted to imprison him. Address of the full text: https://www.sashu.com. Download of the full text: https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 1426. That was why she could reach this level of power. But she was unlucky to encounter such a disaster right from the start. So her track of growth was broken. He had studied the power of the Bai family thoroughly. She had no bargaining chips to fight with him, especially when he focused on her. Gunanli looked at her. The smile in his eyes turned into a soft sigh. But there was no doubt that this softness was unusually cruel. He thought that he could lean on her to sleep, but his insomnia was also formed because of Gubuda. Was this considered repaying his father's debt? Gunanli drank the wine in one gulp. His eyes did not leave her. She looked sideways at the port, as if she was too lazy to look at him. He did not care about her indifferent attitude. So be it, Gunanli thought indifferently. Like or not, this kind of feeling was too extravagant. He never thought about such unrealistic questions. It was only women who liked this kind of clingy and sticky stuff. The waiter came over. "Mr. Gu, the fireworks are ready." Gunanli's face was calm. He looked at Wei Wei Bai. She did not seem to hear their words. Her eyes were focused on his port. The lights on the ship made her side profile look even fairer. The red curve of her lips was perfect. However, her eyes were extremely cold. She really did not like these little girls' toys. But he could not let her touch the weapons. Even if there were no bullets, who knew what she could hide with her terrifying skill of disassembling weapons? He was used to nipping all dangers in the bud. So she could not touch anything, including the most ordinary gun. Gunanli looked at the time. It was 10 minutes to 12. He said to the waiter, "Once it's 12, light it up." Even if she did not like it, the fireworks still had to be lit. If the fireworks were extraordinarily beautiful, she might like it. With such a childish need for secrecy, Gunanli had the rare patience to wait for the fireworks that he was not interested in to light up. While waiting for the last 10 minutes, Wei Wei Bai suddenly let out a sigh of relief. "The gift I prepared is almost here." Gunanli was looking forward to it. "What are you giving me?" Wei Wei Bai's red lips curled up, and her eyes turned cold and sharp. She seemed to have practiced this move thousands of times. She suddenly flipped over the railing and stood outside the boat. On the outside of the boat, there was a small edge. If a person stood on it and didn't hold on to the railing, they would fall off in a matter of minutes. The yacht was stationary. At the very least, there was no need to worry about falling into the propeller and being torn apart. However, the undercurrents beneath the surface of the sea made Gu Nanli's pupils contract. He held his breath and said softly, "Wei Wei, come back." Wei Wei Bai said with a smile, "Why are we going back? You're nobody to me, Mr. Gu." These words were straightforward and could be considered as the truth. Indeed, she was nobody to him. No one would treat their mistress as someone important in their life. When Gu Nanli first kept her in captivity, he only intended to give her the title of mistress. Gu Nanli's fingers held the wine glass. His fingertips were a little white. He suppressed his tone and said gently, "Come here. Even if you jump now, you won't die. You won't be able to escape. You know the chances of you being rescued on such a calm sea. You also know that you won't be able to swim to shore alone." Chapter 14:27. As long as she was in the sea, the people who caught her would be the people on this yacht. Many of the bodyguards he brought knew how to swim. He clearly understood that she would be fine if she did this, and it was also a stupid move. But why was he still nervous and even afraid? Wei Wei Bai grabbed the railing with one hand and swayed to hang out of the yacht. Her high heels were straining to stand on the edge, as if she would fall into the sea at any moment. She was not afraid and only smiled. These shoes are really a hindrance. After saying that, she kicked off her shoes and revealed her beautiful round toes, which were covered in red nail polish. The color was as bright and dazzling as fire. Bai Weiwei also raised her toes. "You see, I specially painted my nails for today, although you don't like it. But your dislike doesn't count for anything." Gu Nanli also saw the nail polish. He kept it and did not let her apply it, and she did not apply it for a while. But today, she deliberately applied it. Was it just to annoy him? Gu Nanli took 2 steps forward and tried to divert her attention. "What do you like? I won't stop you in the future." Taking away her nail polish was also for her own good. He felt that these things were not good for the body. Not only was it ugly, but it was also a health problem. Although he faced death at any time in the world he lived in, but he still had the attitude to maintain his health. Bai Weiwei was surprised and mocked. "You also have a day like this, Mr. Gu. I thought you would directly push me into the water." Although the grudge between the two of us was a life for a life and ended when I defeated you, it's obvious that you still can't forget that we have a grudge. Suppressing me and imprisoning me is just another way of revenge. After saying that, she shook her head seriously. "You are really narrow-minded. I thought that although you are a ruthless person, you would still abide by the rules." Speaking of this, she sighed. "But I was too naive. I didn't expect that you would break the contract and lock me up." During this period, she could not even go out of the door. And what was more frightening was that no one could contact her. Bai Mu and the other members of the Bai family probably thought that she had gone missing. Gu Nanli calmly took a step forward. "Revenge? If I really wanted to take revenge on you, why would I put you by my side?" Wei Wei Bai gave him a dangerous look. "If you come any closer, I'm going to let go." Gu Nanli stopped in his tracks, suddenly not daring to move forward. Wei Wei Bai looked at him strangely. "Mr. Gu, you're so obedient. If I didn't know that you hated me, I would have thought that you really liked me." "I like it." This word made him dazed for a moment. He pursed his lips, unable to calm down. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 25. Before Wei Wei Bai could be happy, her favorability towards him finally moved. Gu Nanli's eyes turned cold again. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 20. 20. Was 20 cursed? Why was it maintained at 20? Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. She really wanted to push him into the sea to wake him up. "You have a soft spot for 20. Can't your favorability increase by just 1 point? Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 21. Wei Wei Bai, Mr. Gu, you're really obedient. Gu Nanli suppressed his emotions, and his voice turned cold. "I've never thought of taking revenge on you. You just obediently stayed by my side and didn't have anything. Even if you went out to fight, this is a dangerous business. You could die at any time. Transmigration system. Male god, come here." Transmigration system. Male god, come here. / transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. Chapter 1428. Wei Wei Bai faintly raised an eyebrow. So what? Gu Namli's words paused, and his eyes finally changed. He repeated each word. So what? Wei Wei Bai, yes, so what? If I die, I'll admit it. If I don't die, I'll succeed. I'll enjoy what I should enjoy. Why are you pointing fingers at my life? What does it have to do with you whether I'm in danger or not? Even my father didn't discipline me like this. When she said this, she gave a cold smile. Mr. Gu, you're really strange. Why are you so worried about my life or death? Is it just because I can sleep with you? Yes. Why was he so worried about her life or death? Was it just to sleep? Gu Namli finally couldn't lie to himself. No, he cared about her. He didn't know how much he cared about her, but when he saw her standing outside the boat, his palms began to sweat. He wasn't even this nervous when he faced so many bullets, but he was so nervous about whether a woman would fall into the sea or not. There were no sharks in the sea, so she wouldn't die. Why was he so nervous? Reason warned him, but it didn't work the first time. He still couldn't suppress his heart beating faster and his anger for being played by her. Ding! The male lead's affection has increased to 25. Wei Wei Bai. This affection is really dragging on. Can it increase faster? Give me 100 to start with. Gu Namli looked up at her for a while. Her short hair fluttered in the sea breeze. Her face was exquisite and beautiful, but this beauty was suppressing a coldness. This woman was never a daughter flower, nor was she a caged bird. He trapped her. No wonder she had nowhere to vent her anger. Gu Namli's handsome face, in the darkness and light, had a cold and lonely feeling. His fingers clenched and his nails hurt a little. Suddenly, he walked forward step by step. All right, stop playing. Let's go back. Gu Namli knew that she was resisting him, but he still wanted to hold on to her and not let her go. Debts must be repaid. She had lived a good life for him for so many years. Shouldn't she compensate him for the rest of her life? She had said it herself. You owe a favor. You owe a favor. You owe a life. You owe a life. She owed him half a lifetime of good times. For the rest of her life, she could only bitterly follow him and repay this debt. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed slightly. Don't come over, Gu Namli. Gu Namli said coldly. Go ahead and jump. If you jump, it won't be difficult for me to pick you up. It was too childish to threaten him with this. Suddenly, there was a whooshing sound, followed by a boom. Fireworks exploded in the dark sky. Gu Namli was distracted by this voice. Then, he saw Wei Wei Bai slowly reveal a happy smile. Was she that happy to see fireworks? Could it be that fireworks were beautiful? A strange feeling flashed through Gu Namli's heart. Something was wrong. He suddenly looked up, only to see a flame rising into the sky from the port, followed by the sound of an explosion. Gu Namli rushed to the railing, gripping it tightly with both hands as he looked fiercely at the port. Was it attacked? No. Very few people knew about this port's business. There must be a spy who betrayed them. Gu Namli reached for his phone, intending to direct the chaotic scene at the port, but his phone was gone. Wei Wei Bai's voice sounded calmly. How about this gift? Mr. Gu. Gu Namli turned to look at her, only to see that she was holding his phone in her hand, smiling very happily. He wouldn't let her run away as she wished and let her live a good life. Wei Wei Bai suddenly shouted coldly, Let go of me, Gu Namli. Gu Namli sneered, Dream on. The table knife in Wei Wei Bai's hand stabbed down even more fiercely. Gu Namli held on her back and was about to violently carry her in through the railing. But in the next moment, Wei Wei Bai pushed him away fiercely. He didn't let go of her hand, not letting her have her way. In the next second, a bullet had already shot between them. If Wei Wei Bai hadn't pushed him, this bullet would have taken his life. Gu Namli's expression changed, and he looked at her strangely. Why did she save him? Wei Wei Bai had already broken free from his wrist and jumped into the sea. Gu Namli hurriedly leaned against the railing and stretched out his arm, but he couldn't grab hold of her clothes. When he saw her fall into the water, his mind was blank and buzzing. By the time he realized what was going on, he had already jumped into the sea and followed her in. A dirigible rapidly approached the place where Wei Wei Bai had fallen into the water and pulled Wei Wei Bai out of the water. Wei Wei Bai boarded the dirigible and slapped Bai Mu's face. She scolded coldly. "Who told you to kill Gun Nanli?" Bai Mu's face flushed red, and he didn't dare to look at her. Wei Wei Bai was drenched in water, and her expression was cold. "Hurry up and leave. This is not a place to stay for long." The dirigible flew away quickly. The bodyguards on the dirigible also jumped down one after another to save their boss. Gun Nanli emerged from the water, his cold black eyes staring fixedly at Wei Wei Bai's rapidly departing figure. He stared for a long time, and his voice actually softened. "You can't bear for me to die, Wei Wei Bai." Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 30. Chapter 1430. Wei Wei Bai happily ran away from Gun Nanli. Gun Nanli was also in a terrible fix because of many business locations and many technical secrets that had been leaked. Wei Wei Bai was too ruthless. She almost beat him down to leak the secrets. There were so many secrets, so many connections, business locations, and a bunch of high-level technologies that were seized with blood and fire. She simply leaked it out. Moreover, she even attracted by Mion's forces. During this period of time, not only did he have to deal with the underworld trying to seize power, but he also had to deal with the crisis of revenge. He also had to face several waves of police officers who were eyeing him covetously and wanted him dead. Gun Nanli's side had suffered huge losses, and many people had died. Now, the underworld was waiting for him to fall so that they could completely divide him up and eat him. Gun Nanli thought that he had locked up a bird, but in fact, it was a wolf with fangs like him. She stayed by his side for more than 2 months. Every day, she was plotting how to destroy him. This was truly a beautiful and frightening gift. Gun Nanli listened to his subordinates report the speed of the recent collapse of the industry. There was also a huge loss of connections. His face was quiet, his beautiful eyelashes drooping, and his eyes were covered with a layer of gray shadow, with a hint of cold death. It seemed that the subordinates' report did not cause much of a reaction from him. One of the more loyal subordinates braced himself and advised, "Mr. Gu, you'd better go to sleep. Your body can't take it." In fact, if he hadn't stayed by Wei Wei Bai's side for more than 2 months, Gun Nanli's body would have adjusted a little. Relying on his body's foundation that had been tormented for many years, he would probably collapse in more than half a month. In this half a month, he almost didn't sleep. If he closed his eyes, he would barely sleep for an hour or two, but he would immediately wake up with nightmares. Recently, he even began to vomit blood. This was a protest of his body that couldn't take it. If he didn't sleep, even if he didn't have anything to do, he would still die. It was only because Gun Nanli had such a strong mind and a strong body that he could hold on for so long. Gun Nanli reached out and gently pressed on the top of his nose. His fingertips were white, but they were delicate and fragile. After so many days of torment, he had lost a lot of weight. Originally, he was young and had a delicate appearance. Now, he couldn't suppress his elegance, making people feel that he was too thin and clean. He didn't look like a bloody, cruel, and powerful leader at all. His voice was a little hoarse. "I can't sleep without her." Before he could finish his sentence, he was cut off. Gun Nanli remained silent for a while, as if he was possessed. Only then did he regain his cool demeanor. "It's okay. I can still hold on. After all, what I want now is more than before." During this period of time, the number of assassinations had increased by several times. The speed at which his career was collapsing was so fast that he could not control it. Gun Nanli recalled Wei Wei Bai's cold expression before she jumped into the sea. He finally understood. Not only did she want to take revenge, but she also wanted to completely eradicate him. Only in this way could the Bai family gain survival space and further expand their power. And he was so careless in front of her, even too relaxed. He thought that if she lost the opportunity to hold a weapon, she would not be able to escape. He didn't expect that not only did she escape, but she also dragged him into the mud. Gunanli also knew why she wanted to force him to his death, because only in this way would he not be able to catch her. He was now a thief who was thinking about her, and there was no way to guard against thieves for 1,000 days. She wanted to destroy him so that he would never have a chance to get close to her. It was a very rational, perfect, and even cruel plan. Chapter 1431. Gunanli suddenly felt a tightness in his chest. He covered his mouth with a handkerchief and coughed out a mouthful of phlegm that contained traces of blood. Overexerting one's health was not a good sign. The subordinate was shocked. "Doctor," quickly called the doctor. Gunanli looked at him indifferently. His eyes were cold and filled with anger. "I won't die. Don't be so flustered." The people under him started to panic and couldn't keep their cool. It wasn't just his health problem. The crisis they were facing had never been so serious. It was natural for people to be anxious. Gunanli sighed. He reached out to support his chin and slowly closed his eyes. He could still hold on and control the people under him. If he suddenly fainted one day, they would probably take revenge on Wei Wei Bai. Because of this huge crisis, the people under him hated Wei Wei Bai to the core. How could he not be anxious and angry in his heart? However, he still couldn't give the order to assassinate her. She stunned him too much. She also entangled with him too much. He couldn't bear to destroy her so easily. That was why he suppressed the resentment of his subordinates and didn't let them find trouble with her. Gunanli closed his eyes and thought. Suddenly, he fell asleep. He leaned against the chair and maintained the posture of supporting his chin. There was a dark green under his eyes. The subordinates immediately didn't dare to say anything. They carefully retreated, afraid that they would disturb his rare sleep. If they didn't sleep, they would probably hold a funeral for Gunanli. Gunanli didn't have nightmares. It could even be said that it was a beautiful dream. He saw Bai Wei Wei, bored to death, using a small brush to brush her lip gloss with a pout. The light red color of the lipstick was very beautiful. Although Gunanli didn't understand why women were so passionate about these things, after looking at it for a long time, he felt that it was quite pleasing to the eye. Wei Wei Bai noticed him and looked up at him lazily. She suddenly waved her hand casually. "Gu Era, this is the most popular lip gloss color. Do you think it looks good?" Gunanli didn't get angry when he heard Gu Era call him that. He smiled. "It looks good." Wei Wei Bai looked at him in surprise. "You changed. I thought you would say that this thing poisoned me." "Gunanli, it does look like poisoning." Bai Wei Wei's face was full of ridicule. "Sure enough, you're a straight man of steel. A man like you will never get a wife in your life." Gunanli was already in front of her. She took the small brush from her hand and looked at her quietly for a while before saying softly, "You're not the one who was poisoned. It's me." After he finished speaking, he kissed her. It smelled like lip gloss. It was fruity. It's ding. Ding, ding, ding. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 35. Gunanli suddenly woke up. His heart was filled with a gentle feeling of joy, but he saw that he was sitting in a chair and there was nothing around him. The happiness that came from the dream turned cold just like that. His eyes were clear. He looked at the time and saw that he had already slept for 3 hours. It was hard to get good quality sleep. Gunanli said helplessly, "I really was poisoned." Wei Wei Bai was feeding the dog. Hearing the notification of the favorability increase, she asked the system strangely, "Gunanli is happy from being tortured?" During this time, Gunanli must have been tortured to death. She was prepared for his favorability to drop back to 20. She didn't think that Gunanli would mysteriously increase his favorability. The system was frog-hopping. It was full from eating snacks and was digesting them. "Your Shao air has become fatty air. I thought you forgot about the strategy. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. /transmigration system. Male god, come here. /transmigration system. Male god, come here." Chapter 1432. Bai Wei Wei. I'm waiting for Gunanli to go bankrupt, be hunted down, and fall into a miserable situation. Then I'll wait for him to be so miserable that he can only pick up leftovers from the trash can to eat. Then I'll go and redeem him. The favorability will definitely rise. System. If the male lead really falls into that state, he'll probably die together with the host. When that time comes, it'll be the one to save the host. Wei Wei Bai. How's Gunanli's progress now? System. Struggling bitterly, seeking victory in the midst of danger. The male lead's luck was very good after all. When other people were so unlucky, they would probably become a beggar hunted down like Wei Wei Bai hoped. Only Gunanli could still hold on and did not really fail. Wei Wei Bai, he's so good at holding on. I've already sold him everything, but he still hasn't been defeated. What's his bank password? I'll take all his money. The system was shocked. Host, although I know you're evil, immoral, and have no bottom line, you deserve to be fried in hell, but I still underestimated the extent of your lack of bottom line. She even stole the bank password. This was even more shameless than selling her body. Wei Wei Bai, the system had not been sharp-tongued for a long time. Why was it not used to hearing it? Wei Wei Bai tried for a long time, but still could not get the password. She walked out of the door a little regretfully. After all, Gunanli was a little more miserable, but the initiative was in her hands. She was miserable in so many worlds. This world was for her to conquer for a lifetime. She really wished that Gunanli was really a beggar. Then, he could only please her. That way, she would be able to gain favorability without any worries and live a good life. Of course, it was just a thought. A man like Gunanli, so cunning and smart. If she was not careful, she would probably be chopped into pieces and die without knowing how. Wei Wei Bai sighed. When would there be a world where the target was a silly and sweet person? It would be best if it was the kind that was stupid to the point of being retarded. Wei Wei Bai even said to the system, "Why aren't there any retarded targets?" The system said, "Don't make random wishes. What if a retard really comes?" Wei Wei Bai, "It's easy to fool a retard." The system said, "Retards have incontinence, drool when eating, and don't flush the toilet." Wei Wei Bai, he definitely couldn't tolerate not flushing the toilet. She suddenly felt that Gunanli was much more pleasing to the eye. At least he didn't drool when eating. Wei Wei Bai was waiting for Gunanli's downfall while dealing with the Bai family's business. Now, the people in the underworld were swarming to attack Gunanli. Instead, she was ignored. This made it less obvious when she quietly changed her name. Today, because of a certain Lotus's plot of land, she needed to meet with a real estate tycoon, the kind that was purely business. Wei Wei Bai carried Xiao Air into the car. After a few months of growth, he had turned from a little husky into a Chinibya husky. Although it was still relatively small in size, it was already quite heavy. Because he had grown up, his retarded face became even more retarded. Wei Wei Bai didn't mind. When she got out of the car, she specifically asked Bai Mu to take care of the dog. Bai Mu's ability to take care of dogs was top-notch. He didn't procrastinate when dealing with matters and was very loyal. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai had gotten used to using him and didn't replace him for the time being. The location of the date was a golf course, which was also the most famous club for the rich. When she entered the club, she didn't see the real estate tycoon. Instead, it was the tycoon's son. The rich second generation still looked very young. When he saw Wei Wei Bai, he immediately walked over attentively. Crossover system. Prince Charming, come over here. /crossover system. Prince Charming, come over here. / crossover system. Prince Charming, come over here. Download crossover system. Prince Charming, come over here. Crossover system. Prince Charming, come over here. Chapter 1433. Hello, Miss Bai. I'm Sun Zixing. My father has to attend an emergency meeting, so he can't come. I'm very sorry. He reached out and shook Wei Wei Bai's hand. I'm here on behalf of my father. I hope you don't mind. Wei Wei Bai shook his hand politely and smiled gently. How could I mind? Mr. Sun, you're joking. Sun Zixing was young and handsome. He was rich and used to being flattered. He was also a playboy. But when he saw Wei Wei Bai, he was still stunned. When he saw the photo, he thought it was photoshopped. He didn't expect that the real person was even more beautiful than the photo. Wei Wei Bai tried to pull her hand back, but found that he was holding it tightly. A trace of disdain flashed through her eyes. Sun Zixing reacted and blushed. He immediately let go of her hand and said awkwardly, "Then let's first. What do you want to drink? I'll get someone to bring it over. After all, the contract needs to be considered and it will take a long time." Wei Wei Bai said, "Water is fine. Don't be so nervous. I won't eat you." She looked at him generously. The mole at the corner of her eye was even more exquisite. Sun Zixing was used to seeing beauties in the entertainment industry, but he was still defeated by her simple gaze. He immediately took a few steps back and turned to leave like a young boy. Wei Wei Bai was very calm. The system was also very calm. Wei Wei Bai and the system didn't pay much attention to the reactions of passers-by. Suddenly, the system sensed something. It looked back and saw a glass screen. And behind the glass screen, a familiar and elegant figure appeared. This was Wei Wei Bai's blind spot and couldn't see. But the person behind the screen could see Wei Wei Bai. It was careless and didn't notice the male lead. It immediately reminded her. The male lead is behind the screen on your left. He's looking at you. Wei Wei Bai's face was calm. Don't worry about him. As long as he's not here to kill me, don't bother. Before Gu Nanli suffered enough, she would not go near him. Why did she approach him? Gu Nanli was probably fuming right now and wanted to kill her. Now was the time when Gu Nanli was at his most ferocious. Was she going to deliver herself to him for him to bite? Therefore, she pretended not to see Gu Nanli. She also prayed hard that Gu Nanli's opponent was strong enough to make Gu Nanli lose everything quickly so that she could pick up the scraps later. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai turned around and walked out very calmly. It was impossible for Gu Nanli to follow them at this time. He couldn't even protect himself, so it was definitely not worth it for him to come out now. However, before she could take more than 2 steps, a hand was already gently placed on her shoulder. It was not a strong hand, but the fingers were too cold, causing her skin to turn cold. Wei Wei Bai frowned and reached out to grab the hand on her shoulder. However, before she could turn around, another hand clasped her waist and pulled her into a familiar embrace. The man hugged her and intimately stuck to her hair, his breathing a little messy. "Wei Wei, we haven't seen each other for half a month. Did you miss me?" Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened and she sneered, "Of course I missed you. I was thinking about when you would fall so that I could benefit." Gu Nanli's face was a little pale, and there was a hint of fatigue on her face. There were dark circles under her eyes. He leaned his head lazily on her shoulder. His face was a little thin, which made it look even more exquisite. "Your gift kept me busy for a period of time, but it's almost over. Once I'm done with this busy period of time, I'll go and pick you up." Because he was tired, his words were a little lazy, and his hoarse voice sounded deep and sexy. However, the words he said made one's back tingle. "After I pick you up this time, I won't let you escape." His pale lips curled into a cold smile. "You really make me worry." Wei Wei Bai lowered her eyes and said indifferently, "Gu Nanli, if you don't let go, I'll kill you." Her hand was holding a small pistol, which was already pressed against his waist. Gu Nanli was silent for a while before he slowly let go of her. Wei Wei Bai did not let her guard down. Instead, she took a few steps back before turning around to face him. Gu Nanli stood by the screen. He was wearing a white shirt and black pants. His black hair covered his eyes, and he was as pale as a vampire in the dark night. Wei Wei Bai looked at him warily. "You still want to lock me up? You don't have the strength now." During this period of time, he was like a stray dog. He was just sure of falling. Gu Nanli smiled and did not say anything, but his eyes were looking at her greedily. Sun Zixing walked over with a glass of water and saw this tense scene. He stood beside Wei Wei Bai and looked at Gu Nanli strangely. "What's wrong?" Just as he asked, a hand was placed on his shoulder. Wei Wei Bai said calmly, "Gu Nanli, this is my fiancé. He's young and handsome, and he's a super rich second-generation heir. I'll have to rely on him if I want to change my image. It's impossible between you and me, so don't stick to me like a plaster." Sun Zixing and the system were speechless. The host's brainstorm was too fast. What should they do? Gu Nanli was silent for a while before he said slowly, "Are you sure this soft-footed shrimp can satisfy you?" Wei Wei Bai said quickly, "Do you think you're tough?" The scene was quiet. Very quiet. The slash. The Chapter 1434. Wei Wei Bai felt that it was too damn quiet and couldn't help but break the awkward atmosphere. When I say hard, I don't mean hard. It means strong and cute. You guys understand, right? After saying that, the scene became even quieter. They didn't understand, but they also understood what was going on. The scene was still too awkward and silent. On the contrary, Gunamli couldn't help but smile. His gloomy and pale face gained a bit of vitality. He sighed softly with a hint of affection. I understand. Then he slowly walked in front of Sun Zixing and sized him up with his cold eyes, as if he was weighing something. When everyone thought that he was going to greet him, he suddenly grabbed Sun Zixing's arm and twisted it fiercely. The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Sun Zixing's face immediately turned pale. He opened his mouth wide in pain, as if he wanted to call for help. Gunamli's expression was incomparably calm. His other hand grabbed Sun Zixing's neck and lifted him up, slamming him into the glass window. Sun Zixing was in so much pain that he couldn't even make a sound. He could only turn red and tremble. Gunamli's voice was soft and gentle. This is my woman. Do you understand? A trace of fear appeared in Sun Zixing's eyes. His body wanted to struggle, but he couldn't. In front of him, Sun Zixing was a pitiful little lamb. Gunamli's eyes were a bit bloodshot. It was unknown whether it was caused by lack of sleep or jealousy. Wei Wei Bai frowned. Enough, Gunamli. Do you have to destroy my opportunity to cooperate? When Sun Zixing heard Wei Wei Bai's voice, he couldn't help but look at her with a hint of pleading for help. Gunamli calmly said, If you look at her again, I will gouge out your eyeballs. These words were so cruel that it made people tremble. Sun Zixing immediately didn't dare to look. He was so scared. Papa, save me. Gunamli coldly looked at Sun Zixing before letting go of his fingers. This pitiful man's legs had already softened, and he sat down on the floor. He turned to look at Wei Wei Bai. Fiancé, don't say such things that will cause me to misunderstand in the future. What kind of cooperation is this? As long as I'm here, it's useless for you to work with anyone. His presence alone could ruin any perfect cooperation plan she had. The blurred charm in by Wei Wei's eyes disappeared. Instead, they were filled with mocking anger. Step by step, she walked in front of Gunamli and raised her head to look at him. She reached out and gently touched his face. Why are you so skinny? She didn't seem to care about him at all. Gunamli couldn't help but answer, I've been busy recently. Wei Wei Bai smiled. What's wrong? Are you busy running for your life, Gunamli? Her fingertips had already brushed against his cheek, and a faint red mark appeared on his cheek. You want to stop me with your current appearance? I'll cooperate with whoever I want. Can't you just quietly be a stinky rock in the corner and not come out to block my path? Her words sank, filled with anger that was difficult to suppress. My father is dead, and the Bai family has no intention of fighting with you in the underworld. If you let me go, won't everyone be happy? It was only 35 points of favorability, but she was already so possessive. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but say to the system, if I get to 100 points of favorability in the future, Gunamli won't turn black, right? The system couldn't help but remind her he won't turn black. Without waiting for her to relax, the system said, he's already black. There's no way he can get any blacker. Bai Wei Wei. At the slash crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www. Sashu. Com download Transmigration system. Adonis, come here and read this on your phone. https://m. Sasha. com//. Chapter 1435. The system comforted her. Don't be afraid. At most, he'll just make a cage to lock you up. Doesn't he want to rear a bird? A method of rearing birds with 100 favorable impression points is definitely a golden cage. Wei Wei Bai, this way of comforting was too scary. Gunamli's eyes were dark. His pale face revealed a gentle smile. Everyone is happy. He chewed on these 4 words calmly. Then he reached out and grabbed her fingers. Her nails were painted with a certain brand's light pink nail polish. It was not as dazzling as red, but it had a restrained freshness. Her original nail color was still better. Gunamli suddenly said, "Do you know? I learned some common knowledge about nail polish colors." He was under a lot of pressure recently. The way to relieve his stress was to mail many nail polish brands and then study them one by one. His subordinates thought that he was starting to have schizophrenia due to lack of sleep. For example, he started to like women's things. Maybe one day, they would think that they would wear women's clothing and become perverts. But Gunamli only did it because she liked it. He could actually relieve his stress by studying the things that she liked. He really cared about her. Wei Wei Bai said coldly, "Why? Are you planning to enter the makeup industry after going bankrupt? It's easy to earn money from women. Remember to inform me when you start a company. I will take care of your business often." Her words were full of sarcasm. She did not give him any face. Gunamli did not reply. He had not seen her for a while. When he saw her today, he could not help but want to take a few more glances. He could even ignore her cold and sarcastic words. Actually, it was not suitable for him to show up today. Even his coming here was a secret. But when he saw her with a man, he lost control of his calm and rational mind and walked out. Gunamli looked at the time and realized that it was about time. He turned around and looked at the person behind the screen. They were here to discuss matters today. They had just finished talking. It was time to go back. Gunamli couldn't help but hold her fingers and kiss her nails. His eyes were gloomy and had a trace of strange heat, which made his beautiful eyes look a little evil. "Next time, don't provoke me like this." He was like a barrel of gunpowder now. If she continued to provoke him like this, he could only settle the score with her. Wei Wei Bai took a few steps back with a cold expression on her face. Then she said, "Gunamli, you'd better take care of yourself. The winner takes all. You don't have a chance anymore." Gunamli saw that his subordinate had already come over and was holding his coat. His subordinate came over to help him put on his coat. Gunamli was also expressionless. After putting on his suit jacket, he returned to his usual cold and serious self. "I'm leaving. Take care of yourself during this period of time. After all, you owe me, and I'm still waiting to get back at you." She had caused him to lose so much by leaking information. He couldn't let her go. As for what she was going to use to pay him back, it was all up to him. Gunamli turned around and was about to leave when he suddenly stopped in his tracks. Wei Wei Bai had already silently raised her gun, as if she had been waiting for him to turn around for a long time. Gunamli's heart raced a few times. His breathing became hot. "Wei Wei, you really make me unable to be careless." Waiting for him to turn around before raising her gun to kill him. She clearly couldn't bear to see him die. Yet, she could still raise her gun so coldly at him. Wei Wei Bai sighed. "Gunamli, originally, I didn't intend to take your life on account that you have a good figure and have slept with you a few times. But looking at you, once you turn around, you will take revenge on me. I'm afraid." To read the at https://www.sashu.com/ to read at https://www.sashu.com to read at https://www.sashu.com to read at https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 1436. Her voice was cold and indifferent. Her words were heart-wrenching. "Although it's almost impossible for you to make a comeback, but what if?" She was rational and cruel. She did not have a trace of a woman's soft sensibility. "You only brought 1 or 2 people today and did not bring a gun. You were too careless. This is a good opportunity to kill." Wei Wei Bai's cold red lips curled into a smile. "So I'm sorry. I think a dead person will not make a comeback. If I kill you, I won't be afraid that you will come and catch me." Gunamli's breathing became heavy. His eyes were bloodshot and burning excitement appeared. How could she be so cute? She actually wanted to kill him so simply and crudely. Gunamli's gloomy mood for many days was driven crazy by her. His fingers slowly clenched. His cold fingertips pressed against the flesh of his palm as if he wanted to grab something. The subordinate beside him said calmly, Mr. Gu, you have to go. The commotion they caused was too big. Gu Nanli should not have appeared today. It was too dangerous. This was too unlike him. Gu Nanli nodded faintly. Then, ignoring Wei Wei Bai's gun behind him, he walked out directly. Wei Wei Bai's eyes narrowed dangerously. Her finger was about to pull the trigger. Bang! A bullet suddenly brushed past her hair and hit the glass window behind her. A crack appeared on the bulletproof glass. Wei Wei Bai's finger froze. It was a sniper. It was no wonder that Gu Nanli was not afraid at all. The snipers around him were the best form of protection. When Gu Nanli walked out, he looked at her sideways with a smile in his eyes. He said softly, "You still have a lot to learn, Wei Wei." Wei Wei Bai put away her gun. She reached out and tucked her hair behind her ear expressionlessly. The system said, "Favorability will not increase." Such a confrontation, such a state of mutual hostility. The host actually thought that the favorability would increase. The system said that this was probably a misjudgment. It even told her about the existence of the sniper, so she decided to shoot anyway. Could their favorability really increase by killing each other like this? He wasn't a masochist. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 40. Wei Wei Bai was as calm as the wind. Gu Nanli is a combination of a masochist and a masochist. If I don't have a love-hate relationship with him, how can I increase my favorability? She did not see how excited he was when she killed him just now. This kind of pervert was trying to win her affectionate heart. Could it be that she really wanted to win him over until the end of time, until she died of old age? To put it bluntly, Gu Nanli's emotional threshold was too high. This kind of man had to be tormented to death and arouse all of his emotions. Hatred, anger, joy, and sorrow. Only then would his feelings fluctuate. Once his feelings fluctuated, there would be a chance for his favorability to increase. However, no matter how well they got along with each other, he wouldn't have too many feelings for them. To put it bluntly, he was an emotional sloth. He would feel uncomfortable if he didn't draw. Wei Wei Bai put away her gun. What a scam. Although I know that a lifetime strategy will definitely give me a difficult strategy target, this kind of man is too tormenting. The main system just couldn't bear to see her live a peaceful life. After Wei Wei Bai finished lamenting, she remembered the important matter. Then she lowered her head to look at the stunned Sun Zixing. She half squatted down and reached out to pull him. Sun Zixing trembled and looked at her with a bit of fear. Wei Wei Bai smiled gently. That was just a small accident. Mr. Sun, let's continue to talk about the cooperation. Sun Zixing forced himself to speak with a trembling voice. We don't do things like forcing people to buy and sell. I won't marry you. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. /transmigration system. Male god, come here // transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here, comma. Chapter 1437. That man just now was too scary. If he dared to get too close to Wei Wei Bai, he would be killed. Because the sniper bullet brushed past Wei Wei Bai's hair and passed through the glass beside his head. This was a blatant warning, wasn't it? Wei Wei Bai's smile stiffened. I'm not marrying you either. It's not right for you to be such a coward. The coward Sun Zhe was furious. I'm not working with you anymore. Wei Wei Bai nodded faintly. Suddenly, he pulled out his gun and hit the glass. The glass window, which had already cracked earlier, shattered with such a heavy blow. Bai Wei Wei smiled kindly. Say it again. Do you want to sign your name on the cooperation agreement? Today's contract was for building materials. The price was very good. As long as he signed, he couldn't go back on his word. Sun Zixing cried. He was only here to discuss a normal materials contract. He snatched this task because he saw a beautiful woman in the photo. In the end, he entered a bandit's den. The man was cruel, and the woman was cruel too. He wanted to go home and save his life. Sun Zixing endured the humiliation and cried, I'll sign it. Don't kill me. Wei Wei Bai smiled kindly. Mr. Sun, what are you talking about? I'm a law-abiding citizen. It's good for us to do business happily. Gu Nanli got into the car, and the car drove away smoothly. A gray-haired man sat beside him. Is that your little bird? Gu Namli closed his eyes tiredly and didn't say anything. The gray-haired man disagreed. Gu, you shouldn't have walked out just now. Although I know that you Eastern men value a woman's chastity, it's not as important as your life. Gu Namli was in a very dangerous situation now. If he wasn't careful, he would lose everything. Their meeting behind the screen was an absolute secret. Gu Namli finally opened his eyes. There was cold sweat on his forehead. It was caused by too much excitement. His body had been rather weak recently, causing him to not be in a good condition. Gu Namli said calmly, "It's fine. No one thought that I could work with you, CCE." The gray-haired man smiled. "Are you planning to kill him? When we were in school, we talked about working together, but I didn't expect it to happen so soon." Gu Namli was expressionless. "After this is over, I will help you kill your brother." A deep killing intent flashed in CC's eyes. "It's fine. Take your time. I really enjoy the carnival of climbing up the ranks." Suddenly, he laughed again. "But the little bird you like is really pretty, especially when she wants to kill you with a gun." Gu Namli suddenly looked up at him. His pale and cold face was delicate and ruthless. "I don't like you talking about her so frivolously." CC's cheeky smile disappeared. He shook his head. "Gu, you look very serious." Gu Namli didn't answer. He just closed his eyes indifferently. CC asked carefully, "Do you really like her that much?" "Like her? Do I like her?" He didn't quite understand this feeling. Just when CC thought that Gu Namli had fallen asleep, he suddenly heard the man's hoarse voice. "I don't know. I just think she's very cute." It was true. Very cute. From her toes to her hair, from her lips to her eyes, she was so cute that he couldn't help but want to grab her. Was this liking her? He didn't know. CC repeated, "She's so cute." Gu Namli said, "If you mention her again, I'll beat you to death." CC, such strong jealousy. If this wasn't liking her, then what was it? The download text is at https://www.sashu.com//. Chapter 1438. Wei Wei Bai received the construction materials, and with the various benefits given by Gu Nanli, the construction of the entire land finally started. All the documents were prepared, and the construction team and the team of architects were already stationed. Wei Wei Bai was busy for a while. After confirming that the project was successfully started, she felt a sense of accomplishment and went to see what Gu Nanli was doing recently. Gu Nanli was becoming more and more low-key, and those who wanted to take revenge on him had almost taken over his territory. Many people were now frantically looking for Gu Nanli, planning to kill him once and for all. The more power Gu Nanli had before, the more people he had offended. Now, anyone who had anything to do with Gu Nanli would die a horrible death. The methods of the underworld were frighteningly cruel. Fortunately, when Wei Wei Bai was locked up by Gu Nanli, whether it was by Mu or Gu Nanli, they did not say anything. She was well protected. Almost no one knew that she had been with Gu Nanli for a while. It was obvious that the two of them had a grudge. Now, there were many people in the underworld who had a grudge against Gu Nanli, and there were many who had interest disputes with him. Wei Wei Bai was not eye-catching at all. The Bai family's business was gradually transforming. As long as the project was successful, Wei Wei Bai would receive a crucial sum of money after the transformation, and she would be able to gain a foothold and smoothly wash away all of Bai Qi's shameful wealth. Wei Wei Bai did not want to be so busy, but she was a person who planned ahead. She had a lifetime to live, and if she did not have a career, how could she buy shoes, clothes, cosmetics, travel, and eat good food? Life was too beautiful, and it all needed money. When she was free, Wei Wei Bai asked the system, "Does Gu Namli have any plans to turn things around now?" The system looked at the few melon seeds left in its hand, and it ate a little, afraid that it would finish them all. He could only blame himself for eating too much earlier. His 15 HP was about to be depleted. He made a deal with the Atlan family. Because you revealed all of his trump cards, he had no choice but to start anew. Wei Wei Bai flipped through the information on the Atlan family. They were involved in both legal and illegal activities. Their jewelry industry was world-renowned, and they were #1 in the electronics manufacturing industry. They were also involved in all kinds of livelihood. Anyway, they were making a lot of money. But all this money had a dark shadow. Arms manufacturing, D-products, smuggling, all kinds of terrible deals in the dark world were made in the dark places behind this family. The internal strife of this family was also very tragic. The two most important factions were the legitimate successor, Villiard Atlan, and his illegitimate brother, C.C. Atlan. The two factions fought each other to the death. As for Gu Nanli, he was good friends with C.C. Ever since they were in university, the two of them had been in the same dormitory and had been through life and death together. Gu Nanli had saved C.C. many times. Although to Gu Nanli, this was just an investment. But it was obvious that C.C. had high hopes for Gu Nanli. It was no wonder that he had not fallen and still had some connections, even after she had exposed all of his secrets. He could still turn things around and even return to the top. Wei Wei Bai felt that it would take many years to defeat Gu Nanli. She could not keep revealing secrets. After all, once was fine, but twice and thrice were secrets that could not be revealed. Gu Nanli was not an idiot. How could he not know that she had some kind of cheat code? She would not reveal the existence of the system. Even if it was just a hint, she would not let anyone find out that she had 004. Therefore, the cheat code had to be used carefully. In this dimension, her ability to dismantle weapons, and the first time she had exposed all of Gu Nanli's secrets. /////. Chapter 1439. It was already eye-catching enough if she continued to cheat. Wei Wei Bai helplessly lit the cigarette, then elegantly took a puff and said, "I have to protect you, Tongzi." The system was so safe because no one had discovered it. If she was too demonic and inhuman, then the chances of Tongzi being exposed would be higher. That was why she could not let her abilities exceed her limits by too much, and she could not directly use the system's information after obtaining it. The first time she did this to Gu Nanli was the limit. If she did it again, she would not have any way to hide the source of the leaked information. Although it was a poor and crippled system, but to the people of the normal plane, this kind of treasure that could monitor any corner at any time, anywhere. It was practically a god-level weapon. Who would not want her to be able to be like a fish in water in the conquering plane? It was because the system was almost omniscient, except for the side mission. That deceitful system was related to her. They were not biological siblings, and it was also the secret of her parents having an affair. The system did not reveal anything at all. She had long guessed that the system actually knew about the side mission, but it just could not say. She did not want to make things difficult for it. Who asked her to be such a cute, perfect, kind, and pure super good host? The system suddenly said faintly, "Your expression is a little strange. Are you thinking of some evil plan to destroy the human race?" Wei Wei Bai, the system said, "Your expression is even scarier. Are you thinking of silencing me?" Wei Wei Bai took a puff of the cigarette. "If you continue to blabber, I will put you into the meat grinder and flush the toilet, Tongzi." She cannot be friendly to it for even a second. She might as well cheat it of its application form and change the channel again. The system was silent. Then it said, "Smoking is bad for your health. If you continue to smoke, I will add feces-flavored chocolate into your cigarette." Wei Wei Bai said, "I said it's mint leaves. You have to believe me." The system said, "All right, then I will add more mint-flavored feces for you." Wei Wei Bai did not dare to whip anymore. The mint-flavored poop was too vicious. She couldn't even tell if the mint she was smoking was made of poop or poop. She thought that it would be cooler to come to a big sister's dimension. Trash system, ruining my cool image. I'm doing this for your own good. Wei Wei Bai, huh? The system said, "Smoking is harmful to your health." Wei Wei Bai finally knelt down. "Are you a repeater?" "Father, I was wrong. Please don't repeat this sentence." Wei Wei Bai said, "I actually want to ask, how many years would it take to destroy Gu Nanli? Can you measure it?" The system replied, "Impossible. Wei Wei Bai, you can't even measure the time. Can't you just give me a date to encourage me?" The system replied, "I'm saying that you can't defeat him." Wei Wei Bai was confused. Why? If it wasn't for the appearance of the Atlanta family, she would have defeated him already. The system said, He is blessed with providence. Although providence can't elevate a person to the status of a god, it can guarantee that he won't fall into hell. If it wasn't for Wei Wei Bai, with Yi Yuxuan's status, he could do whatever he wanted in any dimension. Male lead, male lead, male lead, male lead, male lead. Was that a joke? It had never called Wei Wei by the female lead. That was because her providence was so weak. If it wasn't for exploiting Yi Yuxuan's providence, she might not even be alive. The transmigration system, Adonis, come here, / the transmigration system, Adonis, come here, / transmigration system, Adonis, come here. The transmigration system, Adonis, come here. To make it easier for you to read next time, you can click Say below to record this reading record. Transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Chapter 1440. This also led to Wei Wei by exploiting and abusing Yi Yuxuan. It was very calm because Yi Yuxuan would not be in trouble. However, once something happened to Wei Wei Bai, it would tremble in fear. If something happened to her, it would really happen and it would be impossible to save her. Was it easy for it to worry about this old father? Wei Wei Bai said, "Look." The system tried to explain, but it could not understand. So it simply said, even if you take out all the money in his bank account to buy nail polish and sell all his resources, he will not collapse. Because he has no money, he may encounter a super big business opportunity and become rich overnight. When he runs out of resources, a super big benefactor will appear and he will be reborn. Luck was that good. It was also very desperate. Who asked him to be the master of this realm? If he had not awakened, would he be abused by Wei Wei Bai like this? Wei Wei Bai said, "Then my wish of him becoming a beggar and picking up spoiled food from the trash can't come true?" The system said, "If you can look forward to yourself becoming a beggar and picking up spoiled food from the trash can, this wish can come true anytime." Wei Wei Bai's face was full of despair. Why didn't you say so earlier? If she knew that Gunanli would not collapse, she would not have been so ruthless. Now Gunanli was probably suppressing the flames of revenge in his heart. Once he returned to his peak, it would be strange if he did not drag out this traitor and torture her. She thought that after she destroyed him, he could only rely on her. Did she not see that she was working hard to earn money? It was to support Gunanli, who was destined to be poor in the future. The system said, "You were the one who wanted to leak it." Wei Wei Bai said, "You can stop me." The system said, "You were the one who wanted to torment. Didn't you say that a life without torment is not perfect? You are perfect now." Wei Wei Bai was speechless. Although she was indeed perfect, he still felt a little embarrassed to say it out loud. While Wei Wei Bai and the system were having their daily, friendly communication, an invitation suddenly shut both of them up at the same time. It was an invitation from the Atlan family. To be precise, it was an invitation from CCE Atlan. It was said that this illegitimate son of a prominent family just happened to pass by this city and toured his family's property. He planned to find a local tycoon to do business with. He would have full authority to handle all of Atlanta's local businesses. Everyone cheered up. In fact, if Gunanli hadn't kept a low profile during this period of time, this contract would probably have been Gunanli's. Now, all the powers were rejoicing that they had suppressed Gunanli. As a result, everyone could get this rare opportunity. After all, Atlanta's businesses were spread all over the world. It would be very easy for a family to take off if they could get on this line. CCE was one of Atlanta's most valued successors. He was also the one with the strongest influence. Sucking up to him was a shortcut to the upper echelons. Therefore, this rare and glittering banquet was basically a diamond-studded death trap. Wei Wei Bai asked, "Do you want to go?" The system replied, "Your character setting will go." If Wei Wei Bai wanted to change her name, the Atlan family's business was one of the best channels. Therefore, in terms of character setting, Wei Wei Bai had to go. The prerequisite was that Wei Wei Bai didn't know that Gunanli had a relationship with Atlanta. Did Wei Wei Bai know? Even if she did, she could only pretend not to know. Wei Wei Bai took out another cigarette. It was a slender and beautiful woman's cigarette. She said softly, "At this point, there's no way to change the strategy. We can only fight Gunanli to the end. Download the at https://m/com// to make it easier for you to read it next time. You can click save at the bottom to record this chapter. Crossover system, Adonis, come here, comma. Chapter 1441. The system silently ate a melon seed. What should it do if it finished? Wei Bai said, if it's a trap, I'll probably be tied up and chopped into pieces by Gunanli, or hung up and cut into 1,000 pieces. The system finished eating the melon seed and looked at the empty bag. Life was gloomy after eating it. Wei Bai said, I can only seek victory in the midst of danger and farm some favorability points when I'm being tortured. The system finally said, I added poop-flavored chocolate in your cigarette just now. The cigarette in Wei Bai's mouth. She slowly removed it and held her breath. She did not smell anything. Nothing. Wei Bai wore a blue sleeveless evening gown and walked into the hotel with a light-colored petal-shaped bag. The Atlan family had a great reputation. If it was not a banquet, then it would be inviting people from the underworld. There would probably be more famous people from all walks of life. Wei Bai walked into the wolf's den calmly. The hotel was fully booked and decorated with gold and jade. The food and drinks were all top-notch, and the service was top-notch as well. Wei Bai had a good mentality. She could not avoid it. She wanted to be tortured and farm favorability points during torture. That was her strength. How miserable was she? She was tortured to the point where she felt superior. Therefore, the following plot was Gunanli returning to his peak. She could not resist being captured and tortured. Then, she would try her best not to die in such a miserable situation. The foundation of her character was already laid. Unless she really got into a car accident and caused herself to lose her memory and become retarded. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been so nice to Gunanli. The system said, the male lead is looking at you. Wei Bai remained calm. Where? The system said, in the surveillance room. Wei Bai said calmly, oh. As long as he did not suddenly appear behind her, nothing would be a problem. When the banquet started, everyone gathered together. Bai Wei held a tall, slender wine glass filled with champagne. She leaned elegantly and casually in a corner, observing others. In the monitoring room, there was also a pair of tired and bloodshot eyes, but they were still beautiful, staring intently at her. She seemed to have sensed something. Her eyelashes trembled as she lazily raised her eyelids. The ends of her long and charming eyes curled up, bringing out a beautiful arc. The camera was too hidden, so she couldn't find anything strange. She took another sip of wine. In the monitoring room, Gunanli looked at her expressionlessly. His eyes rested on her moist lips for a few seconds before he looked away. He said to the subordinate beside him, don't hurt her by accident later. The subordinate immediately replied, it won't hurt Miss Bai. Gunanli rested his chin on his hand and sighed. His tone was calm and cold. I really want to catch her quickly. The people around him quietly stood around him, not daring to make sound. Gunanli had not slept for more than an hour in a month. At this time, Gunanli's emotions were very cruel and violent. After the death of a few tactless people, the subordinates were very quiet and didn't dare to provoke him. Wei Bai finished her wine and found that the people around her were all rushing in the same direction. She looked over and saw a tall man in a silver-gray suit walking over. His gray hair was not short and was tied up with a black hairband. He was a very typical handsome Western man. He had a high nose and thin lips. His eyes were also gray. It was CC. Because he was not the target of the strategy, Wei Bai lost interest after glance. As for Gunanli, who was in the monitoring room, her gaze softened a little as she stared at her. // Chapter 1442. CCE raised his glass naturally and said a series of pleasantries. Then, he finally said what everyone wanted to hear the most. Because I've been at home for a long time, and my main focus is on my country, I need a business partner here. I've been staying here all this time to find this partner. CCE said with a smile. His eyes swept over where Wei Wei Bai was standing, and his polite expression became more sincere and friendly. Everyone was a smart person, so how could they not see this kind of expression? Everyone looked at Wei Wei Bai in an uproar. His gaze was like a knife, stabbing into her body with a swish. After all, the Bai family was not powerful enough now. Bai Qi was dead, and Wei Wei Bai barely supported the Bai family. It was already impressive that the Bai family did not collapse. But to snatch the big cake, that was the Atlan family. The Bai family was not qualified. If Wei Wei Bai really took this big business deal, from tomorrow onwards, everyone would go against Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai did not seem to notice the murderous aura. She had just picked up a new glass of champagne and blinked innocently. She did not seem to know why everyone was looking at her. Cici maintained his smile. This business partner has just arrived. Let me introduce him to you. The guests with ulterior motives had just turned their attention back to Cici when the sudden change caught them off guard. The service staff next to him suddenly grabbed a guest's neck and pointed a gun with a silencer at the guest's head. With a bang, blood splattered everywhere. Cici held the glass in his hand and took a sip elegantly. He smiled warmly as he watched everything happen. Wei Wei Bai and the system. The guests in the hall were killed in an instant before they could react. Those who reacted in time were shot in the head by a sniper as soon as they pulled out their guns. Cici looked at Wei Wei Bai and sighed. What a beautiful night, isn't it? Wei Wei Bai held the glass in her hand and was silent. The system said, when you came, did you know that these people would be shot in the head? Wei Wei Bai said, I thought that no matter how arrogant they were, they would only detain them and then let them go or lock them up depending on the situation. Who knew that such a tomato-like scene would happen? It was a massacre. The system said, the male lead is here. Wei Wei Bai, it feels like the Grim Reaper is here. She looked up and saw a man walking down the stairs slowly. She saw a man walking down the stairs. He did not make an arrogant entrance, but simply. He was wearing a simple formal black suit and a white shirt. His figure was a little thin, but made him look more elegant and slender. Gu Nanli's steps were steady and relaxed, as if she was strolling in an ordinary garden. Her expression was indifferent and calm. There was no trace of killing intent. Gunshots were still ringing out one after another. The sniper's carnival and the waiter's blood feast. The flowers and blood from the banquet merged into a red and gorgeous carpet. A bullet even went to Wei Wei Bai's side and hit right beside her feet. Wei Wei Bai frowned and took a few steps back. Just as she was about to turn and run, a pair of cold and pale hands landed heavily on her smooth shoulders. She could not move, as if she was caught by the claws of a ferocious bird. Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath and gritted her teeth. Gu Nanli, you're working with the Atlan family? Gu Nanli's hoarse voice was heard. Not only am I working with them, but I'm also working with many people you don't know. You haven't done enough to destroy me. The guests invited to the banquet were almost all dead. A few fresh corpses were still twitching. Wei Wei Bai was still holding the glass in her hand. She gripped it so hard that her fingernails turned white. So you invited us here for revenge? The guests who came tonight all had a grudge against Gu Nanli. Especially those who had trampled on Gu Nanli recently. They died the earliest. Gu Nanli's face was already pressed against her neck. His breath was hot and heavy. He chuckled softly. Then she heard him whisper to her like a demon. Revenge, no. This is just a cage for catching birds. They're all bait. Business contracts, snatching guests, and Atlan's sweet cookies. They were all bait and sweets. It was just to let her, who was cunning and careful, step into this beautiful and bloody cage. He smelled the familiar fragrance on her body. His hand was already holding her waist. His whole body was pressed against her, and his tall figure loomed over her. Wei Wei Bai sneered. Why? Are you keeping me alive and not killing me? Are you waiting to torture me? After all, I'm the one who almost killed you. Gu Nanli did not say anything. He hugged her quietly and buried his face in her shoulder. His soft short hair rubbed against her skin. Wei Wei. His voice was gentle, but the woman in his arms was even stiffer. The banquet finally quieted down. Blood and corpses were everywhere. His faint and tired voice murmured in her ear, I'm sleepy. I want you to sleep with me. He was very sleepy. He couldn't sleep without her. Say a button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 1443. After Gu Nanli said that he was sleepy, he did not go to sleep immediately. Tonight was destined to be a bloody and cruel night. Anyway, those who had a grudge against Gu Nanli, those who had tried to harm his interests, and those who had tried to assassinate him, they would all be dealt with in the time of the banquet. Although it sounded rough and simple, it was necessary to prepare for this banquet. Gu Nanli did not know how much time and effort he had spent to get here step by step. During this time, if he had made a single mistake, he could have been consigned to eternal damnation. Therefore, he was more tired than ever. His hand was still cold as it caressed her shoulder. Slowly, he used his calloused hand to caress the exposed skin of her back and her slender white neck. This kind of contact was too rough. It made Wei Wei Bai's body extremely tense. Her fingers slowly touched her thighs. Guns were not allowed at the banquet. No, it should be said that no weapons were allowed. However, many people did not listen to this rule and secretly brought weapons in. The people who had died in the end had all brought weapons. And because they trusted the Atlan family too much, they did not bring weapons and were shot in the head. Wei Wei Bai did not bring a gun. She brought a military knife, which was extremely sharp and pressed against the skin of her thighs. The cold blade made her eyes clear and sharp. Just as she pulled out the knife and was about to stick it to her palm, she heard a voice coming from behind her. Gu Nanli sighed behind her. "You really make me unable to be careless." Just as he finished speaking, his hand had already firmly clasped her fingers and ruthlessly snatched the knife away from her. Then he bent her hands behind his back and pinned them behind his waist, completely suppressing her. Wei Wei Bai only felt pain in her arms and numbness, but her bones were fine. Gu Nanli was very considerate. "You can take care of the things after this. Look for me in 2 days. Unless something happens in between that time, I have to appear." After Gu Nanli finished speaking indifferently, he untied his tie with one hand and tied her restless hands tightly. Her fingers struggled until they turned red, but his eyes were abnormally calm and repressed. His fingers skillfully and forcefully tied her up little by little. The knot on the necktie was meticulously done. There was no possibility of him breaking free at all. After Gu Nanli tied her up, he grabbed her waist and pulled her into his arms. He carried her in a princess carry and strode forward. Cici took a sip of wine and said with a smile, "I wish you a good night, little bird." Wei Wei Bai was tightly held in Gu Nanli's arms. She didn't see Cici's teasing smile, but she heard his teasing words. When Gu Nanli walked to his side, he suddenly kicked him in the stomach. Cici's expression changed. He dropped the wine glass in his hand and reached out to block his foot. Gu Nanli's kick was too strong. It made his fingers numb, and the pain made him frown. "Gu, do you want to kill me?" This kick landed squarely on his stomach, and he would probably vomit out his dinner on the ground. Gu Nanli said, "I said, if you dare to say anything bad about her, I'll kill you." He could call her little bird. No one else could. Cici saw the ruthlessness in his eyes. He immediately retreated. "I'll clean up your mess for you." After saying that, he fled in a hurry. A man who didn't sleep was scary. A man who was in love for the first time was even scarier. Gu Nanli stuffed Wei Wei Bai into the car and ordered the driver, "Go to the Bai family's mansion." For the https://www.sashu.com/4 https://www.sashu.com for https://www.sashu.com for https://m sashu.com for the full text. Chapter 1444. When Wei Wei Bai heard this, she finally did not struggle. Instead, she shrunk into a corner of the car, her short hair a little messy and sticking to her face. "Why are you going to my house?" The fatigue in Gu Nanli's eyes was obvious. He reached out and rubbed his eyes. "To kill." His tone was incomparably calm, as if he was talking about what tonight's dinner was. Wei Wei Bai's pupils shrank. She said, "Gu Nanli, haven't you killed enough people tonight? You've killed so many people, you'll suffer an unimaginable counterattack. Because Gu Namli tore open his tie, the buttons were also undone, revealing his fragile collarbone and an overly pale neck. His appearance was cold and delicate. With his hair scattered, he looked like a noble young master with a sense of youth. If it wasn't for his usual pressure, anyone who saw him like this would not be able to help but look down on him. Gu Namli used this appearance that made people look down on him. His voice was a little hoarse from exhaustion. This world is very dark. It's just a matter of life and death. I dare to kill like this because I'm the victor. He suddenly reached out, wanted to touch her. Wei Wei Bai turned her face to the side, looking at him with eyes full of killing intent. Gu Namli's fingers stiffened for a moment before he retracted them. Wei Wei, I won tonight. So what if the remaining stray dogs want to kill me? Just like you, I'm going to kill your whole family now and destroy everything that Bai Qi left for you. He slowly revealed a devilish smile. What can you do? Back then, you revealed everything about me and watched coldly from behind the scenes as I was hunted down. You even added fuel to the fire to make me fall. I remember all of that. These were all things that he had to pay back. So many lives, so many losses of wealth, so many narrow escapes. She really wanted him to die. If someone else had treated him like this, they would have died miserably at the banquet just now. She was the only one who could impulsively confront him like a wolf cub. Looking into his cold and cruel eyes, Wei Wei Bai bit her red lips. Her eyes were filled with killing intent as she suppressed her anger. I'm willing to accept my loss. It's my failure that I didn't kill you. You can torture me however you want, but there are a few old people in the Bai family who didn't participate in the matters of the underworld. I promised to take care of them in their old age. Don't touch them. The Bai family did not only have these old people. There were also some relatives of the Bai family. Although they were distant relatives, they had done a lot for the Bai family. With Wei Wei Bai's character, using these people to threaten her was indeed effective. Gu Namli looked at her with gloomy eyes and smiled. This month, I wanted to kill someone every day. The number of times I wanted to kill you is the most, but when I see you, I can't bear to. So I can only kill someone else. No one could survive after betraying him. She was special. Gu Namli had never denied this. He didn't know anything about love. He only knew that he had to fight for whatever he wanted. If he couldn't bear to, he would hold on to it. If he was tired of it, he would destroy it. He still couldn't bear to part with her. Gu Namli's breathing deepened. He closed his eyes and said, I wanted to treat you better, but you didn't want to. I need to take revenge. So many people have died on my side. It's not right if I don't take revenge. So many people had died. He knew very well that his subordinates hated Wei Wei Bai to the core. But he could suppress them. No one dared to do anything to her. And he killed her entire family just to vent his anger. Chapter 1445. After Gu Namli finished speaking, she hid her face in her arms with a cold expression. Then, she took off her jacket and draped it over her. He looked at the chauffeur. The chauffeur had dead fish eyes. He didn't look at the rearview mirror at all, so he pretended that he didn't know anything. He didn't want to have his eyes gouged out and be buried in cement as construction material by Mr. Gu. Wei Wei Bai was confused and asked the system, so did I succeed in seducing him or not? The system looked at the empty bag of snacks and said bitterly, Did you succeed? Did you succeed? Did you succeed? I've finished all my snacks. Wei Wei Bai, 15 days of life points were eaten just like that? Finished just like that? How many months had it been? You wastrel. I asked you to buy food, and you actually went to eat snacks. Before Wei Wei Bai could grab the system's neck and question it, Gu Namli's voice sounded. Go home. He wasn't going to the Bai family, but going home. So he was still persuaded by her and didn't kill her whole family. The driver immediately turned the steering wheel quickly, turned the car around, and stepped on the accelerator, rushing home at top speed. Gu Namli's new house was in the old district of the old city. The houses here were all like courtyards with a deep and winding feeling. Gu Namli carried Wei Wei Bai through the door and walked past the beautiful but Chinese-style bridges and corridors. The house had a modern style. She was placed on the bed by Gu Namli. Then, Gu Namli got up very calmly. He looked at her from afar with reddened eyes. She seemed a little nervous and didn't hide the murderous intent in her eyes. Even seducing him was not a good idea, but she had stirred up all his manly feelings. Gunanli turned around to calm his surging emotions. He found that it was useless, and his forehead was sweating. Suddenly, he heard the sound of her getting out of bed. Gunanli turned around almost immediately, only to see that Wei Wei Bai had already fled. She ran to the door, but because her hands were tied, she couldn't open the door. She kicked at it with her feet, but found that she couldn't open it. Gunanli felt a headache coming on because of her anger. Halfway through her seduction, she planned to run away. For the sake of the Bai family, shouldn't she be flexible? If I yield, I'll only yield half. Did he think that he wouldn't have to pay the bill just because he didn't kill anyone? Gunanli stretched out his long legs, aggressively trying to catch her. Wei Wei Bai found that the door could not be opened, so she ran directly to the bathroom. Gunanli was one step slower, but before his fingers could touch her dress, the bathroom door was slammed shut. Gunanli's breathing was heavy and his eyes were sinister. Wei Wei Bai, come out. She was playing with him again. She had clearly seduced him just now, and he had tacitly agreed that she had succeeded. But the moment she thought that he wouldn't kill anyone, she actually slammed the door in his face. Wei Wei Bai's voice slowly came from the other side of the door. I feel that there's something wrong with you. Let's calm down and have another beautiful encounter. It wasn't that she was a coward. After all, things had already come to this point, and it wasn't that she was being unreasonable. But the way Gunanli looked just now, he was obviously a serial killer. He looked like he was about to kill someone at any time. Wei Wei Bai felt that it was better to let him calm down before continuing with the seduction. She was afraid that he would be impulsive and strangle her on the bed. After all, Gunanli had indeed been living a tough life recently. Address of the full article: https://www.sashu. Address of the Chapter 1446. She even added fuel to the fire, wishing that he would become a beggar in the next second. In the end, the trashy system ruined her dreams, forcing her to face the unbeatable and even more powerful Gunanli. Gunanli stood there for a long time before his expression finally returned to normal, but his eyes were even darker and more terrifying. He walked to the window unhurriedly and drew the curtains. Then, he turned on a few more lights that he didn't usually use, making the room even brighter. Then, he came to the door and politely knocked on it, saying to her, I've calmed down, you can come out. As he spoke, he unbuttoned one button after another. He took off his white shirt, revealing his fair and strong upper body. Under the light, those scars had a kind of incomplete beauty like a sacrifice. Wei Wei Bai's voice had a hint of a lazy smile. Mr. Gu, I'm taking a shower. You can wait for a while. Shower my ass. Her hands are tied so tightly. If he didn't help her untie it, she wouldn't be able to untie it herself without tools. Gunanli slowly exhaled, telling himself to calm down. Calm down. Then, he suddenly raised his leg and viciously kicked the door. The door shook a few times, but the quality was too good to be kicked open. Gunanli's face was expressionless, but his body was surging with a violent and crazy anger. This was the various dark and negative emotions that he had been suppressing in his body during this period of time. He wanted to kill. He wanted to kill her even more. Every time he was in pain, he thought so. But every time he really saw her, he couldn't bear to do it. This kind of contradictory feeling was very unbearable. This kind of unbearable irritation turned into the strength to kick the door. The door that was almost impossible to kick open finally couldn't take it under his explosive strength. The door cracked and the lock was kicked open. Gunanli's leg was a little numb, but this was nothing to him. He smoothly retracted his leg in the air and swung his ankle at the same time. This made his blood flow faster, and the numbness quickly disappeared. Then, he pushed open the broken lock and slowly walked in. It was like a huge shadow shrouding the yellowish bathroom. Wei Wei Bai sat on the edge of the bathtub. There were red marks on her wrists. She seemed to be trying to untie the tie, but failed. She stared at him blankly. It was as if they couldn't understand how someone could kick open such a high-quality door. Wei Wei Bai saw him walking over slowly. There was even a hint of a smile on his face. It was terrifyingly gentle. Wei Wei Bai. Tongzi, there's really something wrong with Gunnanli. Will I be buried? The system said, Where am I? Who am I? Where are you, my little snack? The system was already surrounded by an army of bullet screens. The bullet screen army changed from being rich and powerful and democratic to pineapple crisps, dried bananas, dried kiwis, raisins, and sunflower seeds. The system had never felt so hopeless before. Not only did the bullet screen kill people, but it also hurt the heart. Why did it have to provoke it when it couldn't eat it? And it even came with pictures. The comments on the bullet screen escalated. Wei Wei Bai couldn't hear the system's voice, but he was already in front of her. He asked her kindly, Do you want to take a bath? I'll fill the tub for you. There was no need for her to answer. Gunnanli's rationality had already shattered into pieces. He put her in the bathtub and filled the tub with water. His actions were very forceful, and his strength was unusually rough. Wei Wei Bai was quickly soaked in water. In the dense steam, her clothes stuck to her graceful body. Her beautiful skirt floated like a gauze, and her delicate skin was faintly discernible in the steam. Quick transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Quick transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. /quick transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Quick transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Download the at https://m Sashu.com button at the bottom to record this chapter. Quick transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Chapter 1447. Then, the doctor looked at Wei Wei Bai's face for a while, but he did not dare to touch it. Although he studied Western medicine, his family had been traditional Chinese medicine for generations, so he still knew how to look, listen, question, and feel the pulse. He said, You don't have enough kidney energy, young man. Don't overdo it. Wei Wei Bai could tell that it was caused by a large loss of energy in a short period of time. It was easy for her to recover after resting. As long as she did not overdo it and paid attention to her health, young people would be healthy soon. Therefore, he did not have to worry that she would suddenly fall to the ground and die. The doctor spoke with trepidation, but for the sake of their bodies, he still had to brace himself and say it. Otherwise, it would be his fault if something bad really happened. Doctors these days were fireproof, burglary, and medical disputes. Medical disputes by people like Gunnanli were fatal. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while, then said, Is the kidney energy deficiency temporary? The doctor said, Abstain for a while, and you'll be back. Wei Wei Bai thought, This is not good news. She thought that Gunnanli had erectile dysfunction. She was about to set off firecrackers to celebrate, but it was only temporary. The system said, So you're the legendary couple with kidney deficiency? Wei Wei Bai, who was lying on the bed like a half-paralyzed, looked at the unconscious Gunnanli and finally said, More like a paralyzed enemy. After a night of torment, no one gained anything. No, she did gain 5 favorable impression points, but she was still unable to calm down her wounded heart and ravaged body. Wei Wei Bai lay on the bed for 2 days before she could finally get up. That night, Gunnanli really wanted to kill her, so he did not hold back. Her skin was now covered with scary bruises, as if she had been subjected to domestic violence. Gunnanli also woke up a few times. When he slept, as long as he had a little consciousness, he would hold Wei Wei Bai's hand tightly. Only then could he sleep. For the past 2 days, they were both paralyzed on the bed. Therefore, he slept well in the same bed. But when Wei Wei Bai recovered a little, she didn't want to lie in bed anymore. After all, if a person were to lie down for too long, their bones would become paralyzed. However, Gunnanli still needed to lie down. His kidney deficiency was much more serious than hers. This kidney deficiency was caused by long-term insomnia. Therefore, he had to sleep. He had to sleep enough and sleep well so that his body could recover. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai's current life consisted of eating and sleeping with Gunnanli. Eating and sleeping with Gunnanli. In the end, Wei Wei Bai looked dazed. Who am I? Where am I? Why would I sleep with a man with weak kidneys? Was she here to conquer him or to sleep with him? It was one thing for him to sleep with her, but it didn't even increase his favorability. After spending so much time in the game, he only managed to get 50 favorable impression points. If he wanted to get 100 favorable impression points, he would have to wait until he was 70 or 80, right? Gunanli, this man with weak kidneys, was too difficult to conquer. Wei Wei Bai complained as she ate. She played with her phone that couldn't connect to the internet with one hand and accompanied Gunanli to sleep. Gunanli occasionally looked up at her in daze. His body gradually recovered. In addition to a small amount of nutritious meals and high-quality sleep, his weakened body condition was reversed. Every time he woke up and saw her face, he would heave a sigh of relief. His anxious heart would also calm down. Gunanli thought that he wouldn't have nightmares because she was by his side, but for some reason, he suddenly fell into a sudden nightmare. Endless darkness, a suffocating swamp, and Gu Buddha's crazy and twisted face. Address of the full text: https://www.sashu. Address of it to facilitate your next reading, you can click on the Chapter 1448. The endless cycle of nightmares kept pulling him down. Gunanli's whole body trembled, and he couldn't breathe. In the dream, he seemed to be a helpless child who had nothing and could only be slaughtered. Gubuda's fingers were tightly clutching his neck. He kept questioning why he wasn't dead yet. Why wasn't he dead yet? Gunanli bit his lips. His fingers were trembling. His fingertips were empty. There was nothing. Where was she? Where was her hand? Almost as if he was frightened, he immediately opened his eyes. His face was full of cold sweat, and his eyes were filled with fear. Where was Wei Wei Bai? Why wasn't she by his side? When he woke up, he was lying on his side. This was the direction where Wei Wei Bai was sleeping. But the pillow beside him was empty, and the hand that he was supposed to be holding on tightly to her was empty. Did she escape? Gunanli suddenly sat up. His black hair was messy, and his eyes were anxious and crazy. Wei Wei Bai. He was almost gnashing his teeth, hiding his suppressed hatred. Yes. An indifferent and lazy response sounded like the sound of nature. Gunanli's body stiffened. He turned his head to look at the window, but he saw a beautiful figure leaning against the window. The curtains were pulled up. Beside the mahogany window frame, she looked at him indifferently and lazily. Her posture was as soft as water, as if she had no bones. Bai Weiwei's face was expressionless. The lady's cigarette in her fingers was burning with smoke, making her fingers look like white jade in the mist. What's wrong? Can't sleep again? Wei Wei Bai sneered. Baby boy, you don't even dare to sleep alone. How pitiful. Gunanli didn't say anything. He just stared at her. The fear of being killed by the nightmare just now was appeased by her faint gaze. The light by the window shone on her hair. Every irritable nerve in his body was magically quiet and comfortable. It was as if he had been saved. Gunanli calmed his breathing and then moved his hands and feet. Sleeping for too long had caused his limbs to feel numb. He quickly moved himself to relieve the stiffness in his body. Then he got off the bed. His footsteps were a little shaky. Wei Wei Bai looked at him coldly, as if she was looking at a stranger. This kind of gaze made him feel stifled, but it was better than her resentful and angry gaze. When he had almost tortured her to death on the bed, the image of her breaking down and cursing him, even saying that she hated him, was still vivid in his mind. Gunanli walked in front of her and suddenly reached out to grab her, pulling her into his embrace. But in the next second, he felt a burning pain on the back of his hand. Gunanli's grip on her did not change. He did not even tremble. Bai Weiwei unhurriedly pressed the cigarette in her hand against the back of his hand. His skin was burned by the flames. Gunanli just asked indifferently, "Are you still angry?" Weiwei Bai put out the cigarette and pushed him away. "When are you going to let me out?" Her voice was very calm, and there were no fluctuations in it. Gunanli smiled. His face was still a little pale, and his voice was a little hoarse. "I don't know." Wei Wei Bai looked at him coldly. Gunanli repeated, "I don't know. I don't know when I can let you go." He did have a different kind of feeling for her, a feeling that was different from others. But he was not sure what kind of feeling it was, because he had no kinship, no friendship, and even no love. He had no experience in this area. Address of the full article: https://www.sashu.com. Address of the Chapter 1449. Even CCE was just an object that he could use. Only Wei Wei Bai was different from them. He couldn't bear for her to die, and he couldn't bear for her to hate him. He couldn't bear to let her go. What kind of feeling was this? Gu Nanli's expression was a bit blank, but his hand was very strong as he grabbed her arm. Wei Wei, a person has to accept defeat when they're willing to bet. You know the rules. You lost to me, so it's only right for me to treat you however I want. If she wasn't so special to him, the things she did were enough for him to kill her dozens of times. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while before saying coldly, "I'd rather you kill me than keep me in captivity." Gu Nanli's expression was blank for a moment. Then he returned to normal and said, "I can't kill you. I've tried." Such straightforward words made Wei Wei Bai speechless for a while. He said it so simply and without hiding anything. He deserved to not be able to get girls. At this time, he should cry and shout, "No, I like you. How can I bear to kill you? Just thinking about it makes me feel guilty." Only such words could be used to pick up girls. Gu Nanli was simply a straight dog among the single dogs. He was like an iron wall that didn't know how to flirt. It would be good if he could apply for a change of target. Wei Wei Bai sighed. How did she end up with a man who didn't even know how to tell a few sweet lies? Gu Nanli saw the bruises on her wrist, and his gaze stopped at the back of her neck. The intense kiss marks and bite marks had not faded. It was too intense, too rough. It had been a few days, but the wounds on her body had not healed yet. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said, "What? Do you want to do it again?" Mr. Weak Kidney. During this time, his kidney was weak, so he was fine no matter how she teased him. Because he couldn't. The doctor had said that with Gu Nanli's weak foundation, it would be impossible for him to do such intense and terrifying exercise again in a short period of time. Of course, after a period of recuperation, he would be able to have sex. Unfortunately, now was not the time. It would take at least 1 or 2 months for his body to be in a stable state. After so many planes, this was the first time Wei Wei Bai had met a man with kidney deficiency. Even in the eunuch's dimension, he wasn't a real eunuch, and he didn't have kidney deficiency. He was not even comparable to a eunuch. Gu Nanli's lowered eyelashes trembled a few times. There was a hint of annoyance in his eyes, but he suppressed it and didn't let Wei Wei Bai see it. His voice was much gentler. "Does it still hurt?" Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. "I deserve it. I asked for it, didn't I?" Such sarcastic words were pleasing to Gu Nanli's ears. At least she couldn't learn those suicidal tricks. Even in such a situation, she was still full of vitality. Gu Nanli heaved a sigh of relief, then tried to negotiate with her. "Just stay by my side. I'll still give you those conditions, and I won't touch the Bai family as long as you don't leave." Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment, as if she was thinking about what he meant. Gu Nanli's voice was incomparably calm. "Wei Wei, you can't escape. You should stay by my side. I can give you a limited amount of freedom and give you everything you want, as long as you obey me." These conditions were very good. Gu Nanli felt that he had shown her the greatest kindness. He didn't know what kind of feelings he had for her, but there was hatred and there was definitely love. Sometimes, when he looked at her, it was as if he was looking at his nightmares. Their identities were exchanged, and she was living a life of luxury. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.